Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I do apologize for the interruption earlier. Unfortunately, I lost power, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. But fortunately, that didn't last a super long time. They did fix it. Don't know what caused it, but I don't really care because I got my power back. So, unfortunately, we were interrupted. I do think I remember where we left off, but... So yeah, I'm not going to waste any more time. We already had that preamble in the previous in the stream in the morning. I just want to get back to it because this stream's already going to go late, but it is what it is. So I'm pretty sure we were right about here when we left off, which yeah. Oh, let me put the music back on. Sorry, I forgot about that. There we go. And I think it should be fine. Just let me know if the audio balance is off at all, and I'll fix it. Just as I thought that, she lifted her hand and slapped me. Huh? It was so abrupt, she just struck me across the face. Slightly confused, I asked her, "Why did you hit me?" "Because you're acting so full of yourself even though you're younger than me." So that's it. My cheek was still hot where she slapped me. It stung. That hurt, I thought. My second impression of her was that she was violent. Well, yep, that's accurate. I guess it looked like I had no other option. Alright then, I'll return the gesture. What? I didn't wait for her response, I just slapped her. Smack. It wasn't a very pleasant sound, which... Okay, so I know there's the memes of Rudy's all about gender equality and all that, but honestly, that's as much as it pisses her off, and she goes after him for this, that was probably one of the best things he could have done, as, just having a full-on power move against her, where... It establishes that, again, even though she can and does kick his ass on numerous occasions throughout the course of the book alone, not to mention the series as a whole, what Rudy did here was show that he's actually not going to just bow down to her. She's not going to bend over. He's not going to be a guaranteed pushover. And he's also not going to have the kind of decorum and subservience that she expects from people around her. Because socially speaking, honestly, they're probably not equals, because Eris is part of the established Boreas Grey Rat household, whereas Rudy is essentially an offshoot of the Notos Grey Rats. Because, I mean, technically he is a direct descendant, but Paul was disowned, so they no longer have those ties. So, again, Eris probably does have a higher social standing than him. They're close enough that there's not that automatic subservience that she would have from a tutor. And again, also Rudy just decides, yep, I'm gonna stand up to you. And again, I mean, my interpretation could be wrong here, but I definitely believe that this is probably one of the best things he could have done starting out to really set their dynamic moving forward. For her to at least say, oh shit, this is somebody I can't just outright dismiss. Oh well, it was probably weak because I'm not used to slapping people. That's fine. At least she felt pain. Oh, the pain, I reassured myself. Now, do you understand? Hey, Alan. Glad you could make it. We lost power earlier, so we're still pretty early on in the book. So you didn't actually end up missing all that much, which is, I guess, good for you, but yeah. Okay, now do you understand? How it feels to be slapped was what I was trying to say, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw her hair stand up as she drew back her fist. It was the exact same pose as a Neo statue, one of Buddha's divine and wrathful guardians. Actually, okay, I actually have to look that up so I can see what that says. Okay, I will say that's actually a pretty funny visual that Rudy got there, so. Oh, come on. Where is it? There we go. So yeah, this is what she was doing. She was pulling, well, probably pulled her fist back more than that, but okay, that is a funny visual. Just as I thought that, her fist made contact. Her leg caught mine the moment I began to stumble. Then her hand slammed against my chest, forcing me to the ground. Seconds later, she was perched on top of me. By the time I realized what was going on, she had my arms pinned under her knees. Huh? I can't move? I panicked. Hey, wait! The sound of my dismay was drowned out by her howling. Who do you think you just raised a hand against? I'll make you regret that. So, yeah, I visualized it correctly in the manga. I was so... Okay, that's... Yeah, I'll be honest, I never looked up what that meant beforehand, but yeah, I guess they... and I haven't read the manga, so I can't speak to that, but... Okay, so I do find this also interesting how this is Eris's first response here was, you know, who do you think you just raised a hand against? Because this is actually in a stark contrast to how she eventually deals with, not just disrespect, but anyone kind of going against her or offending her in some way later on, because right now she's still in her early phase where she's just generally arrogant. She kind of utilizes her position, but after going on her journey with Rudy and kind of finding her own identity, kind of rejecting her placement in the Boreas Grey Rat household and just, you know, shifting her allegiance from her old family to the new one she's building with Rudy, and also just the training she does at the Sword Sanctum to give her her own sense of confidence and power, something that she earned as opposed to being born into. She doesn't utilize her position or her associations later on, but early on she does. She's, you know, grown up entitled and spoiled. She nobody ever really tells her no, and Soros certainly doesn't. But so it is interesting because while she does have similar behavior patterns later on, it's so different just fundamentally because, again, later on, her defiance is on her own merits, essentially. Her fist came down on me like a hammer. Ouch, ow, that hurts. Wait, what? No, stop. I took 5 punches before I managed to use my magic to get away. Though my legs started to buckle under me, I forced myself upright and rounded on her for a counterattack. I smacked her in the face with a wave of wind magic. You're not going to get away with that. My attack had thrown her, but it didn't even stop her for even a moment. She came flying at me with the look of the devil on her face. So, I'm curious about what the actual mechanics of this particular fight are, because, as we can see, because Rudy took 5 punches. At least 5 punches. Maybe 5 punches on the ground, plus the one that knocked him down, or 5 total. I don't know for sure. Doesn't really matter a whole lot, but he was not incapacitated by those 5 punches, which normally is, in the real world, you get punched once or twice, you're done. Punched in the head, at least. So, I'm curious as to if she was using her battle aura at all, just even unconsciously, because I know at this point she's still a beginner in Sword Dad style, but her just pure manic aggression probably has resulted in a development of her own mana capacity, and she's probably is using battle aura without, obviously unconsciously. So yeah, she is using it, and I would for the most part agree, Alan. I also, a big reason I think that is because his magic doesn't phase her. She's able to kind of overpower through the wind magic he launched at her. And granted, it probably wasn't a super powerful bit of wind magic, but still, she just shrugs it off. And although, again, it is interesting that she hits him a bunch of times, and he's able to recover from it. Because, you know, she should be hit... Again, granted, she's 9 years old. 9-year-olds can't hit all that hard. But she has a battle aura going on, and Rudy himself does not have a battle aura. So there's... I don't know, there's some questions there. Or it could also be that she was just... she could just be hitting his chest, which would hurt, but wouldn't necessarily incapacitate you. So, I don't know. I realized my mistake the moment I saw her expression. Stumbling, I ran for it. She wasn't the kind of young mistress I was used to. She wasn't the whimsical, selfish type that made decisions based on their feelings in the moment. She was more like the delinquent protagonist of a manga. Maybe I could have beaten her with my magic, but I doubted it would make her listen to me. She would bide her time to recover, then come back for revenge. I could hit her with magic each time, but her resolve would never waver. Okay, so there's some truth to that. But I also do think that if Rudy actually did kind of fight back against her when she did her thing, I think there would create that resolve he's talking about, he could probably end up channeling that if he really wanted to. I know they eventually work things out in a completely different way, but like, again, the idea that Rudy shows himself to not necessarily be a pushover is, I think, something that could have actually gotten through to Eris to some degree, to at least let her say, hey, I can't just throw myself at this problem. I can't just make this problem go away. So, I don't know. Unlike a manga protagonist, she seemed the type to fight dirty, too. She might throw a vase at me from the top of the stairs or come at me from the shadows with a wooden sword. She would do anything to make sure she returned the damage she received tenfold. If the opportunity came, she would hold nothing back. This was no joke. I couldn't use healing magic because I couldn't stop to chant the spell, but so long as we kept this up, there was no way she would listen to what I had to say. I was going to have to use brute force to make her listen to me. That, however, was the one decision I couldn't make right now. There. Now we're all caught up. And again, that was great, because I mentioned earlier that I fucking loved the intro to this book just because it literally written like a horror novel, which, again, I think Adifajin just kind of saw the opportunity and jumped on it. Exhausted from her pursuit, the young mistress eventually gave up and returned to her room. She didn't manage to find me, but it was close. I felt numb as that red-haired demon went by me. I'd never imagined I would experience being the protagonist of a horror movie in this way. Utterly exhausted, I returned to Philip, who was waiting for me with a bitter smile on his face. So how'd it go? It didn't go at all, I answered, on the verge of tears. When she was punching me, I thought she might actually kill me. When I ran away, I was nearly in tears. It had been so long since I felt like this. Still, I had experienced this before. Not that I was carrying the trauma with me or anything, which, yeah, I mean... So I'm actually curious to see how much of a connection this has to his old bullying, because I get the idea that, I mean, with Eris, it's not personal. Like, she just kind of lashes out at anybody who threatens her with doing something she doesn't want to do. It's just kind of... It's like a natural response, you know, she's like a caged animal lashing out, as opposed to the bullying that he received, which was targeted and deliberate. So, I mean, he does reference the trauma of the bullying, so he, you know, it probably is visceral to him, but I wonder if it probably doesn't feel like a one-to-one for him, if I had to guess, based on how he's reacting. Well, going to give up then? No, I'm not. How could I? I hadn't accomplished anything. If I backed down now, it meant I got punched for nothing. I want your cooperation to do what we talked about before. I bowed my head to him, sharp and low. I was going to teach that beast what true fear really was. All right, Thomas, make the preparations. Right on cue, the butler took his leave. Philip said, "You really do have some interesting ideas." "You think so?" "I do. You're the only teacher to have come to me with such an ambitious plan. I think it will be effective, though. Still, I was a little nervous. Would my little trick really work on someone with her personality?" Philip shrugged and said, "Depends on how hard you work." Naturally. And so, we began working on our plan. I had entered the room they gave me. It was exquisitely furnished. It had a large bed and other heavily decorated furniture, beautiful curtains, and a brand new bookcase. All it needed was an air conditioner and a computer, and it would be a shut-in's paradise. It was a nice room. This had to be a guest room rather than servants' quarters, given to me because I bore the name Grey Rat. For some reason, most of their maids were beast folk. I heard they discriminated against demons in this country, but it seemed beast folk were a different matter. And with hindsight and future knowledge, we do know, in fact, that that's correct. The beast folk are not necessarily equals to humans as far as interpersonal stuff goes, but they aren't treated the same as demons because the beast folk were allies in the human-demon war, and also the Grey Rats in particular have a thing for beast folk, so, and that's a bit of a running joke throughout the series, and I know, especially Eris in particular, has so many funny interactions with Linnea later on, and I know it's a long way off, but I cannot wait for us to get to that, either in the books or in the anime. "Ah, Paul, you bastard, this is one hell of a place you shipped me off to." The Boreas greeting, "Yep." I sank onto the bed and put my throbbing head in my hands, probably a lingering effect from the punching. I muttered a chant to heal my wounds. At least it's better than what happened in my previous life. Sure, the part where I got punched and kicked out of the house was the same, but this time things would be different. I wouldn't just be left out in the cold. There was a world of difference between my present and my past. And actually, I do really like these little interjections he has, where, oh shit, things suck, but not as bad as it could be. I still have things I need to do. Like his old self would have taken difficulties and used that as an excuse to stop moving, essentially. Whereas his new self is actually using his hardships as an excuse to push forward, as a reason to say, hey, I'm having these difficulties, but that just means I haven't done what I need to do yet. So, again, it shows that he is not, I wouldn't say necessarily growing. I think this is just healing. Paul would make sure of that. He'd already prepared a job for me, as well as a place to sleep. He even gave me some spending money. That was more than enough. If my old family had done that much for me, maybe I could have turned my life around. If they'd found a job for me, a place to live, and watched over me to make sure I didn't run away, no. That would have never happened. I was a 34-year-old with no work history. They abandoned me because there was nothing they could do with me. Let's see, his old self, this is the worst. His current self, this could be worse. Pretty much, yeah. Like, for as much as we do see that Rudy does hold on to his issues to a degree, and how he does shut down when things get bad, in his new life, it has to go really bad for him to actually shut down. Whereas pretty much anything would have done it in his old life. So, yeah, his new circumstances and his new path forward have given him kind of a new perspective on everything. And at least, and I notice he's getting more and more self-aware as he really thinks about it. Like, he's becoming aware of the differences between old Rudy and new Rudy. Like he mentions, it's like, you know what? No, if I had these same opportunities back then, I wouldn't have taken advantage of them. Like he is in his current life. So, on some level, he realizes that he's actually improving, even though he probably wouldn't put it in those words. Anyway, I doubted I would have changed even if they did that for me. I probably wouldn't have even tried to get work at all. If they took my computer, my only love, away from me, I would have probably contemplated suicide. Things were different because I was different, because I decided I would work and earn money this time. I may have been forced into this situation, but the timing was perfect. Perhaps I had misunderstood Paul. But he didn't have to send me here to deal with that. What the hell was that rage-filled creature anyway? In all my 40 years of life, I had never seen something like that before. terrifying wasn't even the word for it. It was violent, like a pressure cooker exploding. Bad enough to give you PTSD. I may have wet my pants a little. I also do find that sentence a little amusing just because you think about it. At one point, Eris kinda does give him PTSD. Not like the type of PTSD you get from war. That was Orsted who gave him that type of PTSD, but like she actually does leave like a serious trauma on him, but it wasn't from violence, it was actually from just perceived rejection, which it's interesting. It's like Rudy does get PTSD, just not in this way. Whereas most Japanese blades had a blunt side, she was like a double-edged sword, like a bottle of poison that had been spilled all over the place. Now I understand why she was kicked out of school. There had been experience in the way she swung her fists at me. Those were fists that were used to punching people. Fists that had pummeled people regardless of whether they resisted or not. She was only 9 and yet so skilled at rendering her opponents powerless. Could I really teach someone like that? And I will say that I think that does go back to the idea of one thing Eris does eventually overcome, and something that she has an issue with, is she always kind of operates from a position of power. And that's good when you actually have that position of power. When you don't have that position, that strategy falls apart entirely. Like, again, like when she goes up against somebody, like with the kidnappers later, she goes up against someone that she can't deal with, who is just able to completely outmatch her at every step. And she doesn't know how to react to that. And as she goes into the Demon Continent, she regularly comes across as enemies she can't necessarily handle just going full force up against them. And eventually she ultimately embraces that by going to the Sword Sanctum, where she takes instruction under the Sword God, who is definitely her better as far as swordplay goes. And she learns a lot when she gets into her kind of triangle of sparring partners, where while she does always beat the one person, she can never beat the other person. So, I don't know, that is an interesting setup for just her core, one of her core character arcs. Okay. I talked to Philip about our plan. First, we would kidnap her and give her a taste of what it felt like to be powerless, which, again, that kind of feeds into what I was just saying. That was when I would come in to help her. You call it real rock, paper, scissors? Yeah, that's a fitting metaphor. This way, she would learn to respect me and attend my lessons obediently. A simple plan, but I knew how it should go. So long as I got the right reaction from her, everything would go smoothly. But would it really? She was way more violent than I could have ever imagined. She would bellow and scream until her opponent took the bait, then beat them to a bloody pulp. Her belligerence made it clear just how strong her desire to win was. And I will say, it's like, I do like how Rudy's plan eventually works, but not in the way he thinks it will. Because, you know, it's not that she sees the usefulness of all the things he has to teach her, and then she uses that to give her the motivation to go to classes. It's that Rudy ends up earning her respect, and then she ends up going just because, you know, she respects him and wants to learn from him for him, as opposed to specifically the things he taught her. Although she does get a fascination with magic a little bit. Was it possible that, even after being abducted, she would be completely unaffected? And when I went to help her, she would be completely unsurprised and say, "It took you long enough, dirtbag." It was possible. With her, it was definitely possible. It was likely she would react in a way I couldn't predict, so I needed to mentally prepare for that. Failure wasn't an option. I thought about it. I tried coming up with a plan that would definitely allow me to succeed. Yet the more I thought about it, the more muddied my thoughts became. Please, God, let this plan work. In the end, I prayed. I didn't believe in God, and yet, like any other Japanese person, I turned to prayer when I was in trouble. Please, somehow, some way, make this work, I prayed. That was when I realized I'd left my treasured panties behind in Buena Village, and I cried. There was no God, aka Roxy, here. Again, you know, funny little line to cap things off. Although I do like how it's once again hiding actual serious character stuff behind a funny joke, because, you know, he's joking about having not brought the panties along, and, you know, calling Roxy God, where, you know, making the little connection there. He hasn't full on gotten to his, like, worship level yet, but, you know, it's hinting at that. And so, you know, they made it funny that he's all dismayed that he doesn't have his panties anymore. But realistically, it's just kind of the feather on the cap of everything that sucks for him right now, that he's kind of overwhelmed, he's confused, he's scared, he doesn't know if things are going to work out for him. And and the thing that he kind of uses as his excuse is the panties, when he's actually just generally upset. So now, one thing, now that we're moving on, this is one of my favorite little bits of Volume 2. This is a thing that they feather on the cap. I had another thing lined up. That was not the right analogy to use, but you know what I was trying to say. Yeah, so I do really like this little stat sheet that they do in Volume 2. It's a really cool addition to how everything works. And it's a great way of showing just where Eris is as a character as the book progresses, because she does, change quite a lot even over the course of this book before she's done the majority of her actual growth. Name, young mistress. Occupation, granddaughter of Fitoa's liege lord. Personality, fierce. Doesn't listen to what people say. Reading, writing. Can write her own name. Arithmetic, can add single-digit numbers. Magic, no clue. Fencing, sword god style, beginner tier. Etiquette, can do the Boreas style greeting. People she likes. Grandfather, Ghislaine. Okay, and I will also note that, just like I mentioned in the last book, they're kind of completely ignoring the established rules of, like, because tier is supposed to be a magic thing. That was something I think Rifajin wanted to have a distinction just verbally between swordplay and magic, even though they used the same 7 tiers. They didn't, they would say, they would use like water king tier magician, as opposed to a water king, because water king would be for the water god fighting style, which he established that, but then never actually stuck with it. Even in Volume 1, he didn't stick with it. So just another instance of them just ignoring that. So I think that was one thing. I think Rifajin wanted to have that distinction, but then just didn't do it. Chapter 2, all according to plan. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in the middle of a dingy storehouse. Sunlight filtered through an iron-barred window. I was in pain, but as far as I could tell, no bones were broken, so I muttered a healing spell to recover. There we go. I had fully recovered. My clothes weren't even torn. This was going exactly as I had planned. My plan to ensnare the young mistress was exactly as followed. 1. Go to a clothing store in the city with the young mistress. 2. Let her ill-behaved nature do its work and have her want to go outside by herself. 3. Have Ghislaine escort her as usual, then accidentally look away and let the young mistress give her the slip. 4. I'd follow her, but since I was just a pipsqueak she'd beat the crap out of, she wouldn't care about me. 5. She'd treat me like a minion and drag me to the edge of the city, because apparently she has a deep interest in adventurers. 6. Have someone from the Grey Rat household appear. 7. Have them knock us both unconscious, take us, and confine us somewhere in a neighboring town. 8. Use magic to stage an escape. 9. Once we were out, I'd tell her I thought we were in a neighboring town. 10. I'd use the money I hid in my underwear to get us on a stagecoach. 11. We'd arrive safely back home, and I'd get to hold my chin high as I lectured the young mistress. So, I like how they're setting it up again. They mentioned directly that it's like an anime plot point. But one thing I do like is how we do know, in hindsight, that this completely goes wrong, and that it does, there's a real kidnapping instead. But I think one of the early indicators that it's going to fail is actually, or at least it's not going to work the way he wants to, is this is an 11-step plan. You can't trust a plan that complex to actually work out, because all that happens is one of these has to fail, and then the whole thing falls apart. So I think I like how they had him kind of overly plan out every single step of the way, because that just doesn't happen. Yeah, too many variables. It's like, have you ever had a conversation in your mind? Like a hypothetical, like you're gonna talk to your boss about something, or preparing for any difficult conversation. You kind of have this whole back and forth in your head about what's gonna happen, how's this gonna go, and then 2 lines in, it falls apart because they say something you weren't predicting. It's that kind of thing here. And again, I mean, and they're not explicit about this, but it's like a nice early indicator that it's like not quite wrong. Exactly, they don't stick to the script. I don't know, like maybe they should have prepared as much as I did. Right now, my plan had reached step 7 smoothly. All that remained was for me to use my magic, knowledge, wisdom, and courage to make a magnificent escape. To make things more realistic, I would be improvising a little from here. I was a little nervous about how well that would go. However, things were different from what I'd planned. The storehouse was covered in dust, and in one corner was a broken chair and a discarded suit of armor with a hole in it. My plan was to be somewhere a bit cleaner than this. Then again, we did say we'd make this as believable as possible, so I guess this was the result. The young mistress woke a few moments later. She opened her eyes, didn't recognize her surroundings, and tried jumping to her feet. But since her hands were tied behind her back, she fell over and squirmed like a caterpillar instead, which is a very funny visual, I think. And I mean, it's probably funnier now from my current perspective, just because I know Eris as a character, and you get a lot of time to actually grow attached to her, so the image of her just kind of wriggling around is very funny. She lost her cool the moment she realized she couldn't move. What the hell is this? Stop messing around. Who the hell do you think I am? Untie me immediately. Again, she's addressing conflict by using her position of power and using her connections and her family associations. Just a stark contrast to the Eris we eventually end up getting to know and love. Her voice was unbearably loud. I'd noted this back at the manor too. She really didn't dial down her volume in this small space at all. I thought maybe she raised her voice because the manor was so huge and she wanted people to hear her in every corner of the complex when she spoke. And now, as I mentioned when we were watching the anime, she communicates via shouting. That's her. But no, she was her grandfather's granddaughter. Soros was also the type to shout down his opponent, even if he doted on his granddaughter, and she must have seen how her grandfather intimidated the servants and Philip. Children loved to imitate what they saw, especially if it was something bad. Shut up already, you damn brat! The door banged open and in came a man, probably because of her screaming. His clothes were all ragged and a foul stench clung to him. He was bald and his face unshaven. I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd pulled out a business card that said, "Hi, I'm a bandit." And nice choice, I thought. Now she would never figure out we staged everything. And again, another subtle little indicator that this is not what they were expecting, because if this was somebody from the Grey Rat household, you'd think it takes some time to get noticeably unkempt. Like, yeah, you can put on dirty clothes, ratty clothes, you can mess up your hair, you can do all this stuff, but, it takes a little bit of time to have the stubble grow in to make it look messy. It takes a little bit of time to have, like, a stench really cling to you like that. Like, this person is actually, like, genuinely a bandit. And there are just these little indicators that this is not actually a noble servant. Imagine a hair growing spell. Yeah, I mean, it could be. I don't know if that's a thing that exists. That would be... again, I don't know. I don't think they ever confirm anything like that. Cell regeneration, yeah. It would be a subsection of healing magic. So I imagine it's probably theoretically possible. I just don't know if it's a thing they actually do in this universe. Because I don't think anything like it is ever confirmed or explained as not a thing they do. But yeah, but they did say that they can't help plants grow. Okay, that is a good point as well. Although I'm guessing that's probably due to a lack of understanding of how to actually make that work, as opposed to a lack of it being physically possible. Just because we know that magic can do pretty much anything in Mushoku Tensei. So I imagine healing magic could do the same. Yeah. My guess is that most likely, when it comes to causing the plants and stuff to grow, it's probably because it needs matter and nutrients to actually do the thing. Like, from what I've seen, like whenever they conjure something, it's not that it just comes out of nothing. It's, it kind of takes the mana and gives it a physical form. So there's probably, like, if you make a tree grow from nothing to a tree, you still need a tree's worth of stuff to actually turn into the tree's growth. So kind of like how if you were able to kind of accelerate somebody's growth in the real world, you need they'd still burn all the calories that would happen. Yeah, of mana, exactly. And I would not be surprised if there was if mana was essentially a type of energy, and that there was some sort of conversion between mana and physical stuff, and probably physical stuff could go back to mana in some capacity. I don't know. That's an interesting question. I just don't know the full extent of what that is. But I would imagine, ultimately, if the hair growing spell was possible, it would be a really high level spell. Ew, you stink. Don't you dare come close to me. You smell awful. Who the hell do you think I am? Any minute now, Ghislaine is going to come here and split you in two. Gah! Whack. She was sent flying with an audible whoosh. A loud cry left her mouth as she smacked into a wall. Damn brat, think you can mouth off to me, huh? We already know you're the Liege Lord's grandchildren. The man didn't hold anything back as he began stomping on the young mistress, whose hands were still tied behind her back. That's going a little far, isn't it? Again, another indicator, because realistically, while it's not unbelievable that if the plan had gone as expected, the person playing the kidnapper might have a bit of a grudge against Eris and want, and might be a little more rough than was strictly called for, just to kind of get back at her. But actually, like, kicking the crap out of her? Nah, that's not a thing that a member of the Grey Rat household would do, even a servant, so. Or, I mean, I know they do mention that. I think it's the butler ends up being the one who set this all up, but so he might, but anyone who's actually loyal to the household would not be acting like this. So another indicator that, oh shit, things are going wrong. That hurts! Stop it! Puh. He continued kicking her for a while. When he finished, he spat on her face and glared at me. I turned my head to avoid his gaze, and a kick came flying at my face. Ah! That hurt. We were supposed to be putting on an act, but he could have showed a little restraint. I did tell them I could use healing magic, but that's for looking so damn happy. Which, I don't know, I don't know, I find that funny. It's like, the guy's assuming that he's happy for, I don't know, it's almost like, I don't know, I have thoughts in my head, I can't really form them together, but like, I like the idea of, like, everyone who's around Eris wants to get back at her, so it's like, I could imagine him thinking Rudy is happy that Eris got the crap kicked out of her, and then he's, hits him for looking too happy. He exited the storehouse. I could hear voices beyond the door. Did they shut up? Yeah. You didn't kill him, did you? Bang up the merch too bad and it'll lose its value. There was something strange about the conversation. It was too realistic, which would have been fine if it were just an act. The problem was it didn't seem like one. Maybe, just maybe, this was the real deal. Oh? I'm sure it'll be fine. At the very least, we should be fine as long as we still have the boy. Not good. After the voices went away, I counted to 300 before I burned through the ropes tying my hands. I went over to where the young mistress was lying. Blood was pouring out of her nose. She stared blankly as she mumbled something to herself. Yeah, everyone loves to see the loud child trip and fall in a restaurant. Yeah, exactly. Like, like, there's a degree to it. Like, if a kid's being a little shit and they stumble over themselves and fall, yeah, that's kind of like, yeah, you got what was coming to you. When they actually get, like, seriously hurt, that's when there's a problem. Like, again, you want to hit the loud kid in the restaurant to fall, but you don't want him to break his arm, basically. So, then again, the bandits are probably not exactly the most emotionally aware, so they probably don't quite understand that. I realized she was muttering, "You won't get away with this, and I'm going to tell my grandpa," among other more dangerous utterances that I couldn't bear to listen to. And again, I love how even when she gets the shit beaten out of her, she's still just kind of defiant and like just stubborn. Like despite everything that we see in these upcoming scenes, she actually does have a surprising amount of resolve, even as a spoiled 9-year-old. For now, I needed to assess her injuries. Eek, it must have hurt because her head snapped up as she looked at me, fear in her eyes. I put a finger to my lips and monitored her reaction as I looked her over. She had 2 broken bones. Oh, goddess of motherly affection, close up this one's wounds and restore the vigor to their body. X-healing. I chanted a mid-level healing spell in a low voice, restoring the young mistress's body to health. Unfortunately, just putting in more magical energy wouldn't make healing spells more effective. Hopefully what I did was enough to heal her wounds properly. She'd be fine as long as her bones knitted back together the right way. The pain is... She looked down at her body, puzzled. I whispered in her ear, "Shh, be quiet. Your bones were broken, so I used healing magic. Young mistress, it appears we've been abducted by people that bear a grudge against the liege lord. Therefore, she wasn't listening. Ghislaine! Ghislaine, help! They're gonna kill me! Save me! Hurry! Her bellowing voice echoed through the room. I immediately hid the rope that had bound my hands beneath my clothes, scurried to the corner of the room, and hid my hands between my back and the wall, pretending I was still restrained. The power of the young mistress's voice was enough to draw the man back, and the door banged open viciously. Shut the hell up! This time he kicked her even harder than before. She really doesn't learn, I thought. And this is one thing, as Eris, she does wisen up over time, but she's always been, like, not the most intelligent person out there. And I will say that's, again, something I actually do really appreciate. The fact that they made a likable and admirable character. Not at this point, but eventually she becomes a likable and admirable character, but she is not above average intelligence, really. She's very good at swordplay, but in everything else, you know, she's average to slightly below average as far as her intellect goes. And yeah, again, I just like that they don't rely on smarts as a way of making you like her. Little shit, next time you fuss, I'll kill you. And of course, I got kicked a second time too. I didn't do anything. Why'd you have to kick me? Now I feel like crying, I thought as I returned to the young mistress's side. Guh, guh. It was bad. I wasn't sure if it was a broken rib, but she was vomiting blood. One of her internal organs had probably ruptured. Her arms and legs were broken too. I didn't know much about medical treatment, but those wounds looked serious enough that she might die if I just left her like this. And yeah, like, if you hadn't already figured it out by this point, it's definitely, like, it's real. And, I mean, they don't explicitly say it yet, but, like, you know. Let this divine power be a satisfying nourishment, giving one who has lost their strength the strength to rise again. Healing. For now, I decided to use a basic healing spell for a slight recovery. The blood coming out of her mouth stopped. At least now she wouldn't die. Probably. It still hurts. Heal all of it. No, if I heal you, you'll just get yourself kicked again, right? Use your own magic. I can't do that. Which I will say, that's actually also, I think, a big moment right there. That last line, I can't do that. That might be, like, I mean, in the book for sure, but that's, like, one of the first times she ever, like, admits to being incapable of something. Incapable of something that would be beneficial to her. Because usually she says, oh, I can't do that, I don't care. I don't need it, I don't want it. This is the time she's like, she's hurt, and she can't heal herself. And also, Rudy, as much as he's trying to teach her a lesson, he's also probably right, where she would just make noise again if he did heal her fully, and at that point, she probably would have just gotten killed. So, honestly, healing her mostly to, like, you know, healing the real damage and just leaving her in pain is probably actually the best way to go. You could if you learned how. With that, I went to the storehouse entrance and pressed my ear to the door. I wanted to hear more of our captor's conversation. This was completely different from my plan. No matter the reason, they had gone too far. So, we gonna sell to that one guy? Nah, let's use him for ransom. Won't they hunt us down? Oh, and by the way, I'm like 99% sure that one guy that they're referencing is Darius, because just based on stuff that happens later in the series, we do know that this is the kind of thing he would do. And that around this time, he does do this to another noble girl. It is Darius? Okay, I wasn't sure if it was ever confirmed. I know it was, like, strongly implied. I just don't remember it being confirmed. Oops, sorry, I got a cat on the desk, and I don't mind that, but she is standing right in front of my monitor, and unfortunately, I cannot see through a cat. Miki, what are you doing? So you really just jumped onto my desk to walk over and jump off? Just to be annoying? Okay. Let's see. Won't they hunt us down? I don't care. If that happens, we'll just go to a neighboring country. So they really did intend to sell us off. It seemed like we had entrusted the kidnapping scheme to someone close to the family, but had instead gotten mixed up with real kidnappers. I wonder where the plan went wrong. Was it the moment we were kidnapped? Or was Philip really trying to sell his daughter? No, the latter was unlikely. Oh well, either way, my job was still the same. That just meant we had no safety net. Although I do think it's interesting is the idea of Philip trying to sell his daughter. Because he kind of does do that to Rudy later on. He does kind of try to essentially bribe Rudy into being a puppet of his, where they install where they do a coup of the Grey Rat leadership, and then Rudy would be at the top, and Philip would kind of be directing things behind the scenes. And the bribe was Eris, so Philip would sell Eris, just not for money. We get more for ransoming than we would for selling, right? Let's decide by tonight. Yeah, sell or ransom. They seem to disagree whether they should sell us somewhere or demand ransom from the Liege Lord. Let's see. Well, I wouldn't say he sold her to Rudy. He did know she'd be happy. That is also true. That is true, but I think also he probably would have done it regardless of whether Eris was happy with it or not. Like, I think that ultimately, well, I don't think, like, Philip is necessarily, like, this evil psychopath, but I do think he is ruthlessly pragmatic and that he would do, you know, just about anything if it meant posturing the correct way. We had to get moving while there was still light. Alright, what to do? I could smash the door and subdue our kidnappers with magic. Maybe if she saw me defeat the people who had beat her senseless, the young mistress would learn to respect... No, that was unlikely. She was the type to think she could have done the same if they hadn't beat her up. Plus, that would just show her that violence brings results. I mean, it does, but I also get his point. He can't be reinforcing that at this stage. I needed to teach her that violence earned you nothing. Otherwise, she would just keep punching me. I didn't want her to feel like she had that power. There's also no guarantee you'd be able to beat up those kidnappers, I realized. If they were as strong as Paul or Ghislaine, I was positive I'd lose. And if I lost, they would definitely kill me. So, I also do find that really interesting. So, he's thinking, like, what if these bandits are as strong as Paul or Ghislaine? Like, and if you think about it logically, you would not expect them to be as strong as Ghislaine, because there'd be no point in being a bandit. If you're that good at swordplay, because you can make more money legitimately. Paul, again, he's still kind of upper end of what people can deal with. Realistically, also, if you were as good as Paul, you probably still could just be an adventurer and make more money that way. Although we do see that one of them is a North Saint. So that's about, like, and that's considered, like, holy shit, like, a saint tier person is in this bandit group. So, like, I get what he's thinking of, but it's really unlikely they'd be someone he really couldn't deal with, except for the North Saint, obviously. And that's just Rudy undervaluing his own skills, ultimately. Because that's just a consistent thing he does, because he has low self-esteem. You know, what else is new? Alright then, let's get out of here without messing with the kidnappers. I glanced back to check on the young mistress. Yikes, she was glaring at me, her eyes full of anger. Let's just get started with the plan. Wasn't he an advanced... I could have sworn he was a saint, but I could be wrong. We'll obviously find out soon enough. But something in me is remembering him as a North Saint. Alright, okay. No point in dwelling on it right now. We'll know shortly. First, I used earth and fire magic to fill the cracks in the door. Then I melted the doorknob so the handle couldn't be turned. Now it was just a door that couldn't be opened. Of course, that meant nothing if they smashed through it. Still, it would buy us some time. Next, the window. It was a small hole with metal bars in it. I considered focusing my fire magic on one spot to burn through the iron, but that would need temperatures too high to be practical. In the end, I used water magic to loosen the bricks framing the iron bars. Once I successfully pried them out, what was left was a hole just large enough for a single child to fit through. I will say, I do actually, while the escape in the anime was pretty flashy, how he just kind of made that big hole in the wall, I actually think I like this more, because it actually shows the interplay between the power, the actual magical power of the things he's doing, and the actual practical, thought-provoking ways of how am I going to actually utilize this to get what I want done. And it's, you know, while it's less flashy, it feels more real. Now we had an escape route. Young mistress, it seems the people who kidnapped us have a grudge against the Liege Lord. Their friends are going to be here tonight. They were just talking about how they're going to beat us to death. That has to be a lie, right? Of course it was, but the young mistress's face had turned pale anyway. I don't want to die, so goodbye. I grabbed the ledge of the empty window frame and hoisted myself up. At the same time, a voice came through the door. "Hey, this won't open. What the hell's going on?" Bang, bang, they pounded on the door. The young mistress eyed me and the door in despair. "Don't leave me behind. Help." Oh wow, she caved quicker than I thought. I guess the situation was terrifying even for her. I dropped to the floor, got close to her, and whispered, "Can you promise to listen to everything I say until we get back to the house?" "I'll listen, sure. Can you also promise you won't yell? Ghislaine isn't here, okay?" She nodded vigorously. "I'll promise, so just hurry up or they'll come. They'll come." Her demeanor had changed completely from when she punched me. She was filled with fear and unease. Good. Now she understood. I tried to sound calm and cool. "If you break your promise, I will leave you behind." I reinforced the door with earth magic. Then I used fire to remove her bindings and healing to restore her to full health. Finally, I slipped out the window and pulled the young mistress out with me. So I also do kind of like this whole series of events, you know, the idea of the promise, because she does end up kind of breaking the promise regardless. But then it kind of goes bad for her, and then she does kind of reassert herself and resolves to actually keep the promise until they get all the way home. And that's like a big deal for her, where she keeps the promise even after it's pragmatically not really needed anymore. And that actually kind of becomes a solid thing for her moving forward, where she actually does tend to keep her word after that. When she says she'll do something, she means it. And also, it's kind of establishing this is probably the first time she's ever been really afraid of something. And in this instance, it was kind of Rudy who stepped up and helped her. And, you know, moving forward, while she doesn't get scared a lot, when she does, Rudy's always the one she kind of hides behind. With the example I'm thinking of specifically, right after the teleportation incident, when she wakes up and sees Ruijerd and just loses her shit. Once we escaped the storehouse, we were greeted by an unfamiliar town. There were no castle walls. This wasn't Roa. It wasn't small enough to be a village, but it was a very small town. I had to think fast or they were going to find us. "This is far enough," the young mistress declared loudly. She seemed to think we had already outrun our enemy. "You promised you wouldn't shout until we got home." "Why do I have to keep any promises to you?" she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "This little brat." "Oh, really? Then this is where we part. Goodbye." She flared her nostrils and began walking away. But then we heard distant, angry shouts. "Those damn brats! Where the hell did they go?" Either they must have busted the door down or seen that the window bars were missing. Either way, they knew we had fled and were looking for us. "Eek!" the young mistress yelped and scurried back to me. "That was a lie a second ago. I won't shout anymore. Now take me home." And again, yeah, it's like completely unintentionally, that was like the perfect reinforcement that Rudy needed at that moment of, hey, you broke your promise, and then immediately you get in deep shit, so maybe you should keep your promises. "I'm not your servant, nor am I your slave." It irritated me how she changed her mind so easily. "What are you saying? You're my tutor, right?" "No, I'm not." "Huh? You said you didn't like me, so I wasn't hired." "Well, I'll hire you then," she said reluctantly. "I needed a real promise this time. Again with the promises. Once we get back to the manor, you'll just break it like you did a second ago, right?" I said, hoping I sounded unaffected and distant, yet confident she wouldn't keep her word. Yeah, that's, unfortunately, because I live in an apartment, and I have an upstairs neighbor, and I'm not, it's not super thick walls here. I mean, the walls are fine, because there's actually a good amount of distance between neighboring units, but the ceilings are not very thick. Unfortunately, I can't actually be, like, loud, otherwise I'd be having way more fun with the voice acting. But I do actually really like how this is going, where, again, I don't know that Rudy's even realizing what he's doing right here. But he's kind of effectively reinforcing an actual lesson with pragmatic reality, because, it's essentially the boy who cried wolf scenario, where, if you show your word cannot be trusted, people won't trust your word. And it's this instance where he said, look, what does your promise mean to me? Your promise won't work on me because you just showed me that you're willing to break your promises to me. Why should I trust you? And then that forces Eris to realize, oh shit, he's right. I broke a promise earlier, and I'm trying to get something through a promise this time. What is this? Like what do I do? And in this point, she comes to the conclusion that that means her word needs to mean something. I won't break my promise, so I demand... No, I mean, help me. And again, that's also a big moment of her humbling herself. She no longer expresses it like she's entitled to anything. She expresses it as a request, which, I know, it's baby steps with Eris, just like things tend to be baby steps with Rudy, but, I mean, this is actually, like, a big deal for her. You can come with me, so long as you keep your promise not to shout and listen to what I say. Got it, she nodded meekly. Very good, I thought. Now let's move on to the next step. First, I retrieved the 5 large copper coins I tucked into my underwear. This was all the money I owned. 10 large copper coins made up 1 silver coin, so this wasn't much money, but it would be enough for our purposes. Although, I'm trying to think. Because, you know, if 10 copper coins made up 1 silver coin, and 2 silver coins a month is basic living expenses, in Buena Village, granted. So Buena Village is probably low cost of living, relatively speaking, because it's, you know, rural farm area. But still, that's a quarter of monthly living expenses for someone in the rural areas. So it's like, it's not much, he says, but like it's probably something you can work with. And Rudy telling people to keep their promise. Ironic. Yeah, that's also true. I mean, that's also part of what makes Mushoku Tensei a very real thing. You can learn all these great lessons in abstract, but sometimes the real world and pragmatic reality just kind of throws wrenches in things. Things don't always resolve super smoothly. Sometimes you're put into a position where you kind of are like, oh, do I stick to my principles or do I do something that needs to be done? It's like interesting. Another very, very quick tangent, but you know, I'm a Warhammer 40k guy. The first book series I read in 40k was the Eisenhorn trilogy, and that kind of examines that same kind of process of, you know, do you start doing things that are against your principles if the alternative is something you can't accept, and at what point does that stop? Because the idea is that he's an Inquisitor. And Inquisitors kind of have a spectrum from Puritan to rigid adherence to the rules to radical, where you kind of use whatever shady stuff, use the chaos, evil energies to your own purposes. And, you know, how does that process go? So, anyone's interested, highly recommend that. Now come with me, please. We headed towards a town entrance, away from the distant sound of angry shouting. A sleepy guard stood on duty. I passed him one of my coins. If anyone asks if you've seen us, please tell them we left the city. Huh? What? Children? Okay, I guess. You guys playing hide or seek or something? This is a lot of money. Jeez, just what wealthy family are you two from? Please, just tell them what I said. Yeah, I got it. It was a rude reply, but we couldn't afford to linger. Next, I headed to the stagecoach's waiting area. The fare and terms of use were written on the wall, but I had already read that information days ago. Instead, I was looking for the town's location. It looks like we're 2 cities away from Roa, in a town called Whedon, I whispered to the young mistress. Keeping her to her promise, she replied in a hushed voice, How can you tell? It's written right here, right there. I can't read it. Here we go, I thought. Being able to read is really beneficial. The way the stagecoach works is also written here. Still, it was amazing that they managed to bring us this far in just a day's time. It made me nervous being in a city I didn't know, almost like I was reliving a previous trauma, which, you know, that's a little bit on the nose, but yeah, because, you know, he when he was wandering on the day of his death, he didn't really know his way around because he'd spent 20 years in isolation. No, I thought, this is completely different from the time I didn't know how to find the location for Hello Work. Yeah, and again, he says exactly what I was saying, but as I was lost in thought, the sound of shouting drew close. Shit, where the hell are they hiding? Get out here. Hide! I grabbed the young mistress and ducked into the bathroom, locking the door behind us. Outside came the clamor of heavy footsteps. Where the hell are they? Don't you dare think you got away from us. Whoa, scary. Oh, knock it off already. Acting all pissed as you tried to hunt us down. You could at least speak in a sweet voice like an owner trying to draw out their cat. Maybe you would have some chance of deceiving us into coming out. It wouldn't work, of course, but at least you'd have a chance. Damn it, they're not here. And granted, he's not wrong. Rudy's not wrong, but also, you know, the bandits probably aren't the smartest. Historically speaking, criminals are, at least like street-level criminals, often aren't the most intelligent people out there. Sometimes they are, but not always. Before long, their voices grew distant. We had a moment to relax a bit, though it was too soon to let our guard down. After all, when people were in a panic, they tended to circle around and search the same area repeatedly. Are we okay? She held a trembling hand over her mouth. Well, if they find us, let's put up a good fight. Right, okay. Though I doubt we can win. Really? I said it because she looked like she was getting her fighting spirit back. I didn't want to get pummeled by them another time. I was looking at the fare for the stagecoach, and it looks like we'll have to change coaches twice to get back. Change coaches? She seemed confused as to why that mattered. Only 5 stagecoaches leave here daily, one every 2 hours starting at 8 in the morning. It's the same for every city, and it takes 3 hours to get to the next city from here. If we leave right now, we'll be on the 4th stagecoach for the day. In other words, by the time we need to reach the neighboring city, the last stagecoach there will have already left for Roa, so we'll have to spend 1 night in town before we can leave. No, wait, oh, I see. She looked like she was about to shout there for a moment, but held herself back. Yeah, please try to restrain that loud voice of yours. I have 4 large copper coins left, and we have to go to the neighboring city, stay a night, and then go to Roa. We'll be cutting it close. But it will be enough, right? It will. She looked relieved, but it was too early for us to relax yet. As long as no one tries to cheat us out of change, that is. Out of change? She made a face like she didn't know what I was talking about. Maybe she'd never used money for herself before. And I also do actually really like this back and forth here, because Rudy is not even trying to, impart lessons on her, really. He's just kind of explaining the reality of how they're going to get from point A to point B, and all the things they have to consider. Not being preachy about it, but he's just explaining all these things, and Eris has a very stark real-world example of, hey, here's why a lot of this stuff actually matters, because, I can't just swing a sword at it. When the people running the inn or stagecoaches see that we're children, they'll probably think we can't calculate prices, right? That means they might try to cheat us by skimming off the top and only giving us a little change back. Now, if you point out that it's not the right amount of change, they'll give the rest to you. But if you don't know how to calculate it, then what? Then we won't have enough for the last stagecoach, and those guys from before will catch up to us. She began trembling, as if she would pee herself at any moment. The bathroom is over there. I know that. All right, then. I'll go have a look outside. When I tried leaving, she grabbed the hem of my shirt. Don't go, she said. So I actually do, again, like that, where she's she's actually scared, and that kind of brings down all of her barriers, all of her mask, and Rudy happens to be the one ally she has in the area. So, as much as this does teach her to respect him, she also realizes, gets an association that he is safety, friendship, protection, and that when, things are bad, she can, in some capacity, rely on him. And that is a great way to kind of break past their initial animosity, and while they still kind of act as rivals for a while, they're no longer enemies. So I let her take a pee before we went back outside. It seemed like our 2 pursuers had gone, but I wasn't sure if they were still searching inside or outside the city. If we ran into them, I would have to overpower them with my magic. As we hid in the corner of the wait area, I prayed they were opponents I could defeat. When it was time to leave, I handed my money to the coachman and we boarded. We arrived in the neighboring city without any trouble. For the night's stay, I chose a dilapidated-looking shack to teach the young mistress a lesson about how harsh the world could really be. Our beds were made of straw. The young mistress was so wired she couldn't sleep. Every time she heard a sound, she would startle and stare and glare, frightened at the room's entrance. When nothing seemed to be amiss, she would breathe a sigh of relief. She did this over and over, and honestly, it seems like Eris might actually be dealing with a little bit of trauma of her own right now, because, let's be real, she almost got beaten to death, a few hours prior. So she's jumpy, she can't sleep, she's, freaking out every time she hears a sound, so, this probably left some scars on her, to be perfectly honest. Even though she also does seem like the type who, most hardships, she can kind of just, no thoughts, head empty her way through it. The next morning, we hopped on the first stagecoach to Roa. The young mistress must not have slept much at all, because her eyes were bloodshot, and yet she didn't seem the least bit tired. Instead, she kept glancing out the back of the stagecoach, checking for possible pursuers. And also, I will say that her eyes being bloodshot means she was probably crying a little bit, which, not that she would ever admit that, but, again, she's overwhelmed at this point. There's so many indicators so far that she's, really going through it. So, I think that's what the bloodshot eyes are really about. Several times we had a single horseman pass us on his mount, but none of them were our kidnappers. We covered quite a distance, so maybe they had given up, or so I naively thought. Hours passed. We arrived in Roa without any problems. Once we passed through those sturdy walls and saw the Liege Lord's manor in the distance, a sense of security settled in. Unconsciously, I let my guard down, thinking we were safe now that we had made it this far. We disembarked and headed toward the manor on foot. Our steps felt light. After riding in a stagecoach for hours, on top of sleeping on hay for the first time, I was exhausted. Then, as if they'd been waiting for that exact moment, two men grabbed the young mistress and pulled her into a back alleyway. What? I'd let my guard down. It took me 2 seconds to notice. In those 2 seconds that I'd taken my eyes off her, she was gone. I thought maybe she really had disappeared, but out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed clothing that matched what the young mistress was wearing, just before she was dragged around the corner of a building. I pursued them immediately. When I darted into the alleyway, I caught sight of the two men, one of whom was carrying the young mistress in his arms, trying to make their escape. I quickly used an earth spell to create a wall. The magic leapt from my fingertips and a barrier sprang up in front of them. Their pathway was cut off so suddenly that the men couldn't stop themselves in time. What the? Okay, now I also do like another little indicator that Rudy is starting to grow and change as a person, is that there's trouble and he runs towards danger, which, you know, not what his old self would do, except for the truck, but again, he didn't even really think about that anyway. That was an established character trait, but also thinking when he has time to think about it, he probably wouldn't have done it. Old Rudy, at least, would not have done this. The young mistress bit down on her gag, tears beating in her eyes. Amazing. They managed to gag her in just a few seconds? They must be well practiced, I thought. It also looked like they had punched her because her cheek was swollen and red. My opponents were the two who had kidnapped us. One of them was the violent one who'd kicked me, and the other was probably the man I'd heard talking outside the storehouse. They both looked like bandits, and each had a sword sheathed at their side. So it's that brat. You know you could have gone back home safely if you would have just kept your nose out of this. Despite being caught off guard by the sudden appearance of my dirt wall, they grinned when they saw I was their opponent. Although I will say, it is kind of interesting how they don't realize that Rudy's silent casting is a bit of a concern because of how rare it is. But granted, they don't seem like the most intelligent. The violent one came toward me, his guard down. The other was carrying the young mistress. I wondered if they had any other comrades around. Regardless, I conjured a small ball of fire at my fingertips to intimidate him. Bastard. The moment he saw that, the violent man unsheathed his sword. The other man immediately put up his guard and leveled the tip of his sword against the young mistress's neck while backing up. You damn brat. I thought you seemed too calm. Looks like you're a bodyguard, huh? No wonder you escaped so easily. Damn it. I was fooled by your appearance. You're a demon. I'm not a bodyguard. I haven't even been hired yet, I said. I wasn't a demon either, but there was no need to correct him about that. Well, then why the hell are you getting in our way? Well, they plan to hire me after this, so... So you're after money. After money, huh? He wasn't necessarily wrong. I was doing this to earn enough money so Sylphie and I could go to university together. I won't deny that. As soon as I said that, the corners of his lips curved up. Then you should join us. I have connections with a perverted noble that'll pay a high price for a young girl from a noble family. I heard the liege lord dotes on his granddaughter, so we could also hold her for ransom. Either way, we'd get a ton of money. Oh ho! I made it sound like I was impressed by their proposition, and the young mistress turned to look at me, her face pale. Maybe she knew I was seeking employment from her family to earn money for tuition. And exactly how much money would that be? This isn't some piddling 1 or 2 gold coins a month job we're talking about, he said with a self-satisfied smirk. It's gotta be 100 gold coins at least, which, that just from what I know, that's a fucking lot. That's enough to, hire a sword king like Ghislaine as a tutor, a swordplay tutor for 25 months, so that's over 2 years. So he's probably bullshitting, but also it's still going to be a lot of money. It was almost as if he had no real grasp on the economy here. He was trying to brag like a grade school kid saying, it's like 1,000,000 yen, can you believe it? Which, at the time, that was probably around $10,000, which, still a lot of money, but less than it seems. He asked, what about you? You look like a kid. I bet you're much older than you look. Why do you think that? The magic you just used and how calm you're acting? It's obvious. I know there are demons out there like that. I bet you've been given a hard time because of your appearance. right? So you understand how important money is, don't you? I see. So that was what I looked like from an outside perspective? Well, it was certainly true that I was over 40. Ta-da! Congratulations, you guessed correctly. Good job. And again, that's just a great showcase of how Rudy does not act like a kid, even when he tries to act like a kid. People who are actually paying attention aren't buying it. And granted, that's the only... Being a demon is kind of the only answer that makes sense from the bandit's perspective. You're right. After living as long as I have, you get a good sense of the importance of money. I know what it's like to be thrown out into a world you don't know much about with no money and only the clothes on your back. Yeah, you get us, right? Very much so, because until this point, I had never worried about money at all. Instead, I'd spent almost 20 years as a shut-in. Half my life had been spent on nothing but erotic sims and online games. I'd learned something thanks to all that. I knew what it would mean if I betrayed her right there, as well as what would happen if I helped her. Again, and I love how he's framing this in fucking dating sim terms. The idea of, hey, you'll get relationship points if you help her, but if you betray her, your money will go up, but relationship points will go down. It's so stupid, but it works for otaku-brained Rudy. It's exactly why I know there are things more important than money. Don't start spitting pretty words at us. They're not pretty words. You can't buy dead air with money. that cracks me up. Crap, my inner nerd had slipped out. It wasn't like these men knew what tsundere meant. Dere? What the heck is that? The violent man looked dumbfounded, but at least he understood that our negotiation had broken down. And I think that's even funnier when you consider the fact that he slipped Japanese into his human tongue conversation. Because, you know, tsundere is a Japanese word, and there's probably no equivalent in human tongue. So he just kind of... He's such an otaku brain that Japanese literally slipped into his second language as a result of the connections he's making. His creepy smile was replaced by a grim look as he put his sword to the young mistress's neck. Then she'll be our hostage. First, launch that fireball into the air. You want me to fire it into the air? That's right. You'd better not aim it at us, not even on accident. No matter how fast you are, we'll slit this little brat's throat and use her as a human shield faster than you can hit us. Wouldn't you ask someone to disperse their magic instead? Wait, maybe he doesn't know. It did make sense. A channeled spell would keep going until it was released. If you didn't learn magic properly, you probably wouldn't understand the difference between using a chant and not using one. Roger that. Before I discharged the fireball at my fingertip, I used magic to insert another special fireball inside it. Then I launched it into the air. It made a ridiculous noise as it raced upward. A huge explosion flashed above us. Huh? Whoa! The bang was thunderous enough to split eardrums. The light from it was blinding, too. The heat it emitted was hot enough to burn you. And again, I do love just the description of the firework that he basically created, where it was an impressive visual in the anime, but the idea of just, you know, seeing the light and the heat and the sound all kind of, because he probably shot it up, 15, 20 feet, so not that far, but I mean, if you've ever been right up next to a firework, they shoot very high into the air, and if you're right under it, you can feel it when it goes off. As everyone looked at the sky, I raced forward. I conjured magic as I ran. Out of habit, I summoned 2 different spells. In my right hand, I had intermediate tier wind magic, Sonic Boom. In my left hand, I had intermediate tier earth magic, Stone Cannon. I fired 1 spell each at the men in front of me, and I also do like how Stone Cannon would eventually become his kind of go-to spell, which is neat, because, he's still kind of a water specialist at this point because of his tutelage under Roxy, but Stone Cannon just kind of becomes the useful thing just because, you can make it into a bullet, basically. Yeah! Sonic Boom cut the arm off the violent man who was distracted by the explosion. I caught the young mistress snugly in my arms, princess style, as she fell screaming from his grasp. It's not that easy. I glanced at the other bandit and realized he'd cut my stone cannon in 2 with his blade. Ugh, this was bad. He'd actually managed to slice through it. I didn't know what sort of sword arts he was using, but this wasn't good. If you were as strong as Paul, we were in trouble. This might not be someone I could beat. Yeah, having that illustration of Ghislaine saving them pop up because of the 3-page reading is a bit of a spoiler for new readers. Not for this one. Yeah, that's true. Don't forget, this is an ebook, and the 3-page thing is kind of specific to this program that I'm using, generally you're going to have an actual e-reader. And when I first read it, I used an e-reader, so it's one page at a time. Actually, it's more like half of a page at a time because of the, the tablet's kind of small. But yeah, and as I said earlier, I'm not going to care about, especially not this book spoilers. I used a mix of wind and fire magic to create an explosion that propelled me to the air. The force of it was so violent I thought I broke something. The sword came down just a moment too late, narrowly missing me. It cut through the air right in front of my nose, the whistle of it lingering in my ears. That was close. And again, I will also say that this is one thing I do really like about the fight scenes in Mushoku Tensei, in the book specifically, in contrast to the anime, where the books really slow things down, where, the stuff that happens in the space of a few seconds. Like, think about the fight scene with Paul, where the whole thing took place over, 3 to 5 seconds. But it was still, 2 pages of text describing every little action that happens as the fight goes about. This is also the same kind of thing where, so far, probably only a few seconds have changed, have moved since the fireball went off. But it's still been almost a page since that happened, where he's really going into every little detail of things that happened, compared to the anime where things kind of move a little faster and fights tend to get extended a bit. Just because, that's down to the nature of, you can't really stretch time quite that much in a visual medium as you can in text. So that's one difference I made. But that is one thing I really liked about the books, is that they can have these quick fight scenes. They just go into excruciating detail with them. That makes them. It makes me really appreciate all the little nuances that go into fights in this universe. Yeah, and that's true. Rudy is a very detailed person. I think that's one of the reasons the first-person perspective works as well as it does for Rudy, just because he is naturally detailed enough that he tells the story in a very detailed way, the way an omniscient narrator might. But he wasn't nearly as fast as Paul, which meant I didn't have to panic. I had done numerous practice drills against opponents with a sword before, so long as I performed just as well, I could cut my way out of here. I prepared my next magical attack as I hovered midair. First, I sent a fireball straight at his face. It shot slowly towards him. "Is that all you got?" He studied its trajectory, then readied his sword to counter it. While he was waiting for fireball to reach him, I used water and earth magic to turn the ground beneath him into a swirling mass of mud. Quagmire, which is again going to be a signature of his. So, again, they did this in the anime too, but I do like how in the books, they just periodically have him use either Quagmire or something like Quagmire. Almost as a little bit of a teaser. When he tried to cut through my fireball, he sank up to his knees in thick, sticky mud. Now he couldn't move. What? Yes, I won. I was sure of it. He couldn't run now. He may have deflected my fireball, but we were already beyond his attack range. With the young mistress in my arms, all I had to do was disappear into the confusion of the crowds and we would be safe. Oh, or if I needed to, I could yell for help. Just as I thought that, "You think I'm gonna let you get away?" he launched his sword at us. It was then that I remembered what Paul had taught me. In the North God style of swordplay, even if you cut off the opponent's leg, they still had a technique for throwing their sword at you. The blade flew toward me at tremendous speed, but I watched it as if in slow motion. It was aimed right at my head. Death. Right as that word popped into my mind, there was a brown blur in front of me. I heard a sound like porcelain shattering, then the sword fell. Huh? Someone had come between me and the bandits. They stood with their broad, sturdy back to me. I recognized the ears on the back of their head. It was Ghislaine Dedaldaya. She glanced back at me and nodded. "Leave the rest to me," she said. The moment she put her hand to the sword at her waist, the tip of it cut through the air in a flash of red light. And I will say, as much as this is a cool description of the Sword of Light, the anime depicted it in such a way that the book could never hope to match that. Huh? The head of the man knee-deep in mud fell from his neck. This was despite the considerable distance between him and Ghislaine, too far for a sword's reach. "Hey, where the hell did you—" Her tail flicked, and in the next moment, the other man's head fell. I imagined I heard it thump as it hit the ground. My brain couldn't catch up with what was happening. All I could do was watch, dumbfounded, as the two bodies crumpled to the ground meters away from where we were standing. It didn't seem real. I had no idea what just happened. Huh? They're dead? Was all that came to my mind. Rudius, were those two our only enemies? I snapped back at the moment. Yeah, thank you, Miss Ghislaine. Okay, I will say, one thing I do like about what the anime did in this moment is it actually showed how, like, fucked up Rudy was over seeing this guy die in front of him. Because much later on in the books, and the anime as well, there's going to be a whole big thing about Rudy not coming to grips with the idea that he might have to deliberately kill people, and he might need to know that he's killing people. Whereas, in the past, it was kind of always, every time he did kill somebody, it was kind of impersonal. You couldn't necessarily say who he killed, and it was never intentionally that I did this to kill this person. And they seem like they're building up to it in the anime by, showing him react every time somebody dies in front of him. They kind of glance past it in the books, but I don't think it's necessary for that storyline to actually matter, because it stuck with me even afterwards, but I do think the anime is reinforcing it more than the books are. Drop the miss, just call me Ghislaine. She looked back and nodded. I saw a sudden explosion in the sky, so I came to check things out. Looks like I made the right choice. Yeah, you were really fast. I mean, you defeated them in seconds. Only a minute had passed since my first spell, which again shows the great way of showing the scale of how the fight scenes work out, how much they slow things down, where all of that stuff that happened. So let's see, that's almost 2 pages, a page and 3/4, all was a minute of real time. She got here way too fast, no matter how you cut it. I was close by, plus it wasn't that fast. Any warrior from the Dedaldaya family can kill a person in seconds. By the way, Rudius, was that your first time fighting somebody using the North God style? It was my first time in a life-or-death battle, I said. Then let me tell you, those kinds of people don't give up until one side is dead. Be careful. Until one side is dead. That was right. I almost died. I trembled as I remembered how the bandit's sword had come flying at me. It was a life-or-death battle. A real life-or-death battle. Let's go home. If I had made even one mistake, I would have died. This really was a different world. A world with magic and swords. What would happen if I died this time? A chill of indescribable fear ran up my spine. And again, I do like that because Rudy has experience dying. So, it's not something he's eager to repeat. Phew. When we finally reached the manor, the young mistress sank to the ground, completely exhausted. Her legs must have given out now that her nerves had settled. The maids anxiously swarmed around her. When they reached out to help her, she batted their hands away and stood up by herself. Her legs were trembling like those of a newborn deer, and I also do think that's another indicator of growth from Eris. The idea that even though she's in safety now, she still wants to get the next few steps of the way by her own power and not rely on the people around her, and not rely on her family, essentially. She stood imposingly, with her arms crossed over her chest. Maybe she had regained her spirits now that she was home. Seeing her this way, the maid seemed to realize something was odd and stayed back. The young mistress thrust her finger at me and bellowed, I kept my promise and now we're back home, so I can talk now, right? Oh yeah, you can talk now. Hearing how loud she was being again, I realized I had failed. What we'd been through was obviously not enough to change this selfish and violent girl. In fact, she might have guessed that I'd been afraid during the battle. Maybe she would point out how high and mighty I'd acted despite being so weak. And again, I love how he comes to the exact wrong conclusion. And that it's actually like a big deal that she waited until she was on her own property before she actually finally says, I can yell again, right? Or she says talk, but for Eris, talking means yelling. And it's actually significant because she before broke her promise immediately, and now she just actually held on to it past the point where it was actually practical. So Rudy is just so bad with people that he doesn't even see that. And I don't know, it's a lot of nice character work going on here, where, I mean, we just barely met Eris. We're on the 2nd chapter, and we already are having a lot of stuff going on with her. I will grant you the special privilege of calling me by my name, Eris. Her words took me by surprise. Huh? Not just anyone gets to do that, okay? So, did that mean I passed? That I could work here as her tutor? Oh, wow. Seriously? So I succeeded? Yes. Thank you, Mistress Eris. Drop the mistress, just call me Eris. She was imitating Ghislaine. As soon as she finished, she collapsed. And that was how I became the tutor for Eris Boreas Greyrat. I also do like how, while she is probably just taking after Ghislaine and doing the cool thing that Ghislaine does. I also think it is telling that she's telling him to drop the formalities, drop the honorifics and all that. And in a sense, she's saying, stop putting yourself beneath me, put yourself as my equal, which is gonna, set the stage for how they rely on each other moving forward, because they do ultimately have to function as equals, especially during the Demon Continent arc. And then we got another character sheet, and I will say again, I absolutely love just the slow progression we see from how this works. Name, Eris B. Greyrat. Occupation, granddaughter of Fatoa's liege lord. Personality, fierce. Doesn't always listen to what people say. Reading and writing, she can write her own name. Arithmetic, can use addition. Magic, not interested. Fencing, sword god style, beginner tier. Etiquette, can do the Boreas style greeting. People she likes, grandfather, Ghislaine. Again, the way that's going to slowly change over the course of the story is something that I always appreciated. Interlude, the aftermath and the Boreas greeting style. The one pulling the strings behind the kidnapping had been the butler, Thomas. He was the person with the connections to a perverted noble that the hoodlums had referred to. The young mistress had apparently caught that noble's eye a while ago, and he wanted to beat her fierce and unyielding spirit out of her. Thomas, seduced by the money, added the two men the perverted noble had selected into my plan. Geez, there really were some shameless people out there in the world. If he was going to do that again, I wish he'd talk to me first. Which, it's so... That interjection is just so stupid. I love that. Where he's just like, he's almost less angry that Thomas was, essentially going to try to get Eris kidnapped and sold into sex slavery, and instead he's like, man, I wish you wouldn't fucking blindside me like that. He completely miscalculated by not considering two things. Firstly, that I possessed enough magical prowess to escape the two bandits, and secondly, that those two had no loyalty to him whatsoever. As for the perverted noble, he played innocent and escaped punishment. Part of it was because Thomas's testimony was inadequate, and part of it was because the two bandits were dead, so we could find no proof of the noble's involvement. There were too many unknown variables. I suspected political machinations were involved, and again, since this is Darius, yeah, he's connected, he's got ways of wiggling out of things like this. And then, of course, he just does it to somebody else. The incident was considered resolved entirely because of Ghislaine's involvement. The Greyrat family could tout the fact that they had the Sword King Ghislaine staying with them, preventing possible future incidents while proclaiming the strength of the wealth of their house. I was ordered to give all the credit to Ghislaine, even after I told them what transpired. It seemed they didn't want others in the Greyrat family to know of my existence. Yet more political bargaining, I assumed. Correct. The bigger surprise was that there were even more Greyrats. And that's how it is. Understood? Yes, understood. Philip explained all this to me in the reception room. I thought he was just the son of the liege lord, but he was also the town's mayor. I wondered if he was the one who had settled the whole matter. You seem pretty relaxed for someone whose daughter was kidnapped. I am now. I would be panicking if she were still missing, he said. Certainly. Now about you working as Eris's tutor. And as we were to begin discussing my future, the door flew open with a bang, and in waltzed in Eris's incredibly exuberant grandfather. I heard it all, Soros said. He barreled into the reception room and tousled my hair with a firm hand. I heard you saved Eris. What are you talking about? Ghislaine is the one who did it. I didn't do anything. His eyes gleamed darkly, like a bird of prey. That's terrifying. You think you can lie to me? No, but Lord Philip told me to say, Philip! He rounded on his son and without a moment of hesitation swung his fist. It landed with a vicious crack. And I also do really love this, because we see how much Eris does take after Soros, and this is just like... It's almost like seeing Eris in the body of an old guy. Or not even old, he's in his 50s, he said. So in the bodies of a 50-year-old man. It's just, it's funny. Every moment that Soros is involved in is just funny. Ugh. The young lord took the blow right to the face and tumbled over the back of the sofa. The liege lord's fist had been so fast, faster even than Eris, too quick for the eyes to follow. Bastard. This to the boy who saved your daughter. How dare you not offer even a word of gratitude, just so you can partake in your foolish theater between nobles? Philip, still splayed on the floor, responded without moving. Father, Paul may have been disowned by our family, but he's still a Grey Rat. That means his son Rudius, who also carries our blood, is part of our family as well. So rather than outwardly praise and reward him, I thought the best way to thank him was to treat him with the kindness of part of our family. He spoke very matter-of-factly for someone laid out on the floor. Perhaps he was used to being punched by Soros. I would guess that's probably true. One sec. Looks like I may have slight... Just gotta double check some stuff. Okay. Okay. It was looking like YouTube gave me a bit of a warning, but it looks like that was a kind of a false alarm. I dropped a few seconds of frames, but it does look like whatever the issue was, it's been fixed. So that's good. Oh, where am I going? Very well, then go ahead and keep up that farce with the nobles. The older man plopped himself on the empty sofa. It seemed he wasn't going to apologize for punching Philip. That was just the kind of person he was. Physical punishment was as natural as breathing here. Come to think of it, Eris never apologized to me either. She also never thanked me for saving her. Ah, well, it's fine. Rudius, the liege lord, folded his arms, lifted his chin, and glared at me. This seemed familiar. I have a request. Is that really the kind of attitude you should have when asking for someone for something? He was just like Eris. No, that was backwards. She was the one imitating him, after all. I also do think it's noteworthy that Soros, while, again, the joke is that he and Eris are basically the same person, I think it's also worth noting that Soros is kind of like a slightly more mature version of Eris, where he actually does have some sense of decorum and just what to do in certain situations. In this instance, he actually does frame what he's got to do as a request, as opposed to what Eris would have done at the start, which was just demand it. I want you to teach Eris magic. Why, might I ask? She came to me to request it. She said your magic was so seared into her mind she couldn't get it out of her head. It certainly was magic that seared the eyes anyway. Of course, I bit my tongue as I began to respond on instinct. The most likely reason for her horrible personality was Soros always spoiling her like this. Maybe not the only reason, but she had certainly been influenced by him based on how much of his personality she imitated. If she was going to grow at all as a person, I had to stop her from being spoiled. It might not be my responsibility to see she grew up properly, but if things continued like this, it would affect my ability to teach her. It was best to deal with each problem as it appeared. That isn't something for you to ask of me, Lord Soros. Eris should ask me herself. What did you say? Indignant, he raised his fist. I panicked and covered my face with my hands, which, funny visual again. What was he, some sort of nuclear bomb waiting to explode? Do you really mean to raise Eris into an adult that can't lower her head to ask for something when she wants it? Oh ho, you make a fair point. You're right. He slammed his fist on his knee and nodded vigorously. And I also do like, again, Soros is different from Eris in the fact that he's willing to listen to what people say. Like, he's not just stubbornly dashing ahead like Eris is. While he is very forceful and asserts himself more than most, he still, when somebody says something that he wasn't necessarily thinking of, he will acknowledge it, and he will, if it's a good idea, he will say, you know what, you're right. In a great loud voice, he said, Eris, come to the reception room right now. I thought my eardrums were going to burst. What kind of lung capacity did a person need to be able to yell that loud? Eris was the same way. Did no one in this manner understand the concept of asking people to deliver messages? These savages, I thought. Philip returned to his seat on the sofa while a butler, a different guy, apparently named Alphonse, which he's going to be relevant later on, closed the door that had been left open. I later learned that because Soros was like a storm that raged out of rooms just as quickly as he came in, they would wait for a while before closing a door. I fucking love that. He was a selfish old man that loved to throw doors open, but was not as fond of shutting them. Okay, a voice responded from somewhere else in the manor. After a while came the tapping of approaching footsteps. Here I am, just as you asked. She didn't have to have quite the force of her grandfather, but Eris still energetically threw the doors open and burst inside, which, again, I think the anime did this part pretty great. Like, it was a pretty accurate reflection of how I imagine this scene, of both kind of them mirroring one another and it being very funny. Every single action she took was made with her grandfather in mind. Children love to mimic adults, after all. If I hadn't gotten punched my first day here, I might have smiled at the resemblance. Instead, I firmly say that this, too, had to stop. Oh, as soon as she caught sight of me, she lifted her chin and glared, and glared. Was this intimidating pose passed down in the Boreas family? Grandfather, did you tell him what we talked about? He stood suddenly and folded his arms, glaring at her. It was the exact same pose, which... the visuals are just so good. Eris, if you want to ask something of someone, you need to bow your own head and ask. Her lips pushed out in a pout. But you said you would ask him for me. Enough. If you won't ask him yourself, then we won't hire him. Huh? What did he just say? No, wait. I mean, I guess that was right. That would be a bit problematic for me, but I guess this is what you would call reaping what you sow? Grrr. Eris glared at me, her cheeks flushed red. It wasn't a blush of embarrassment. She was pissed off and humiliated. Her face said that if her grandfather wasn't there, she'd chase me all the way to the bowels of hell and turn me into minced meat. Scary. Please? Is that any kind of attitude to take when you're asking someone for something? Soros bellowed. Like you have any room to talk, I thought. Grr. Eris took a fistful of her long red hair into each hand. She made a tail on either side of her temples. Instant twin tails. And just like that, she winked at me. Please teach me magic, Mew. And I don't know how the verbal star here, like how you express that verbally, but like I somehow at the same time know exactly what it means. Like holy shit. And again, I get that it's just an animeism basically. That again, it's funny, but wait, was I dreaming? I blacked out for a minute there. It felt like I just had a really awful dream. Don't worry about teaching me reading or writing, Mew. Well, crap, it wasn't a dream. What the heck? What the heck was going on? Did I just get transported into some weird alternate dimension? At least transport me to a two-dimensional world of anime if you're gonna go that far. I don't need arithmetic either, Mew. Anyway, this was abnormal, terrifying even. Eris's pose should have been cute, but all it did was strike fear into me. Her lips were upturned, but her eyes weren't smiling. They were the eyes of a predator. More importantly, was this really how you were supposed to act when you asked for a favor in this world? You've got to be kidding me. And again, I love how Rudy's just kind of being all confused about, basically about the world building, when not realizing that it's just the Boreas Grey Rats being fucking weird. Because they're, beast folk obsessed, and that's how they all do things. And of course, this is the Boreas greeting, or the Boreas way of asking questions. It's everything. It's one of the things. This is a serious story. Like, there's actually a lot of really good plot stuff and character work and all this stuff going on. Like, it's like there's a reason you can spend so much time just talking about so many of the things the story is doing. But at the same time, you have dumb bullshit like this just interjected almost at random. And it does a great job of hiding the fact that it's a really serious piece of writing. And just, at a glance, you could think it's like every other isekai, even though it's actually just so much more. And I always do appreciate that. Magic is all I need. Mew! Stop messing with me. This is honestly worse than how she was before. Come on, just look at her face. Her cheeks burned bright red, and her expression said, if the circumstances were any different, I'd punch you so hard you'd fly from the depths of hell all the way to heaven. She looked 8 parts angry, 2 parts humiliated, and 0 parts bashful. There was nothing cute about her. Nothing at all. Come on, Saros, let her have it, I begged mentally. Oh, our Aerie is so cute. Rudius, of course you're going to teach her, right? He'd suddenly turned into a fond old man. Who the hell are you? I thought. Where did my strict and reliable great-uncle go? The master has a great fondness for beast folk. He also has the final say when Lady Ghislaine was employed, the butler explained politely. And again, I also do love just the subtle explanations of how these, not just the dynamics of the family work, but how the servants have kind of adapted to the eccentricities of the Boreas Grey Rats, where the butler is able to just like calmly just kind of provide the context and details that Rudy is missing because, Soros is Soros. And explaining the weird beast folk stuff they like, because the butler logically realizes, hey, this is probably weird to anyone who's not used to this, but yeah, this is what happens. Ah, so now I understood. So those twin tails were supposed to be animal ears. They did look like drooping ears. Come to think of it, most of the maids were beasts as well. Yeah, sure, now I get it. Yeah, my inner monologue trailed off. Eris? His father stepped in. Oh yeah, I forgot he was here. I thought. Okay, Mr. Phillip, it's your time to shine. Tell her off. Stick your hips out a bit more to look more appealing. Great. This one is hopeless too. Okay then, now I understood. Now I understood what type of people the Grey Rats were. Paul included. In fact, Paul was maybe a bit more normal than this lot. Lord Saros, could I ask just one thing? Speak. Do men also ask for favors like that? Fool! A man should ask like a man. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I did understand the reprimand. Well, I was right. Compared to this lot, Paul's proclivities were almost normal. He just liked women with big breasts. Okay, calm down. I told myself, let's just think about this. Is this a pass or a fail? I was being stared at. I composed myself and looked at Eris. Angry and humiliated, she looked on the verge of losing control, like a lion with its teeth clamped around one of the iron bars of its cage. And I will say, I know that I'm not saying as much as I would normally like to during this segment, but honestly, I think that there's not a whole lot, aside from what I've already talked about, there's not like a whole lot of real deep stuff happening in this interaction before. I think it's mostly just meant to kind of showcase the Boreas Grey Rats, showcase their eccentricities, the family dynamic, and also just to be a funny scene as well, to be a little weird, to just basically have Rudy be a proxy for the audience right now, where nobody except for Rudy and the audience would be like, wow, this is just fucking weird. So yeah, I think that's the point of this scene. It's not like a super in-depth, high concept storytelling like some of what Mushoku Tensei does. Ugh. Well, maybe I should just forget about what comes afterward and accept this. No, I needed to think about it. I needed to anticipate the possible consequences. That's right, she doesn't like this, I realized. She's against this weird custom they have going on. If I ever requested she personally ask for a favor when it was just the two of us, she might rip me to shreds. Okay, I changed my mind. I need to stop this weird custom of theirs. Is that the kind of attitude you have when asking someone for a favor? My voice was so loud it echoed throughout the manor. I spent hours after that giving her a great long speech. My passion seemed to get through, because after this Boreas style of asking for favors was abandoned, Ghislaine praised my efforts once it was over, but Eris just glared coldly at me. Okay, yeah. Yeah, fun chapter. Well, an interlude, not a full chapter. Chapter 3, Hot Ferocity Unabated. It had been a month since I became Eris's tutor. From the moment I began giving her lessons, she wouldn't listen to me. As soon as it was time for reading, writing, and arithmetic, she would vanish. She wouldn't show her face again until it was time for sword practice. There were exceptions, of course. Magic class was the only one she faithfully paid attention in. The first time she produced a fireball, she was happy and enthusiastic. She watched as her fire roared, engulfing the curtain, and said, "Someday, I'm gonna make fireworks in the sky just like you did." Of course, I immediately put the flames out and warned her not to use fire magic when I wasn't around. Again, I also do think that's an important thing, where Eris says, "I'm gonna do just what you did one day," where she's already starting to look up to him, and he does not pick up on that at all. Eris beamed at the half-burned curtains, satisfied with herself. She looked like a pyromaniac, but at least she was motivated. I felt assured she could get through the rest of her curriculum. Or so I thought. I later realized my prediction was way off base. Eris refused to listen during reading, writing, and arithmetic lessons. If I tried to admonish her, she would just run away. When I tried to catch her, she would punch me and run off. If I caught up to her, she'd come back only to punch me once more and then run off again. I thought she would understand the importance of arithmetic and literacy after we were kidnapped. She must have really hated those subjects. When I went to Philip with my problem, he simply told me, "Making your student attend your lessons is also part of your job as a home tutor." I didn't disagree. Ghislaine attended my lessons and took them seriously, but she was just an extra. I couldn't teach her alone, so I had to search for Eris. Eris wasn't so easy to find. She had lived here her entire life, while I had only been here a month. There was a huge difference in our familiarity with the terrain, and that went for this hide-and-seek problem as well. And I will say another thing that I do find interesting is that we think of things from Eris's perspective. She has probably never had to actually discipline herself in any considerable way, where she doesn't, she's never had to really force herself to do something she doesn't want to do. And so, she can focus on stuff she finds interesting, and of course the fireworks had made Eris interested in magic, so she could actually start practicing and doing magic. But, for reading and writing and math, that's something she still doesn't really care about. And she can't really force herself to do things, or she doesn't really feel like she has an understanding of why she needs to force herself to do things. And part of me also does think that, she might have a little bit of neurodivergence going on. I don't know, like, ADHD would kind of fit with her, because she kind of, hyperfixates, and also is just very distractible in general, aside from that. So, and also the hyperactivity does kind of fit there. So that could also make things a lot more difficult for her, because I can tell you firsthand that ADHD makes it very difficult to self-motivate for certain things. Apparently, other home tutors had struggled with the same issue. Sometimes they would eventually find her, since she might have a wide area to hide in, but it was still limited to the manor. Those that did find her, however, were beaten to a pulp. That was why her first tutor resigned. One tutor tried to beat her up instead, fighting violence with violence. Eris stole into their room in the dead of night and attacked them with a wooden sword as they slept. Needless to say, they resigned after sustaining injuries that took months to fully recover from. Although that's interesting, if it took months to heal from their injuries, do they not have a healer on staff? It seems like that would be something they would do. Well, Ghislaine was the only one who had managed to beat Eris at her own game. I wasn't confident I could do the same. If finding her meant I was going to be sent to the hospital, I didn't want to. I wasn't keen on the idea of discovering her only to be left battered and bruised afterwards. If magic were the only thing she was interested in, why not give up on the other lessons and just focus on that? But Philip insisted I teach her reading, writing, and arithmetic as well. Teach her as much of those as you teach her with magic, he'd said. Actually, those are more important than magic, he told me. I agreed. Maybe I needed to have her kidnapped one more time. Children that didn't learn needed to be punished, which... Just imagine that parenting style. You don't listen, you don't pay attention, you're gonna get kidnapped as a punishment. Just as I thought that, I finally found her. She was in the stables, hidden in the bundle of straw with her belly exposed, resting peacefully. Zzz. She was sound asleep. Her unconscious face was almost like that of an angel. No, I couldn't be deceived by appearances. She was the devil incarnate. And of course, by devil incarnate, I mean the kind that would punch you until you vomited blood. Even so, I needed to wake her up. For the moment, I decided to pull down her shirt to cover her stomach, so she wouldn't catch a cold. Then I started fondling her chest while my inner wise old sage evaluated them. Still an AA cup, but I sense great potential for growth. As you age, you may yet achieve E cup or even larger. I shall massage you daily to check your progress. This is also a chart of your trading. Ho ho ho. Thank you, wise old sage. And yeah, again, this is one of those things where this is one of those scenes that really does tend to put people off when they're first experiencing Mushoku Tensei, because Rudy is still at the point where he doesn't even realize that what he's doing is wrong. He doesn't really view people as real people yet. He just kind of does things. And also, there's the fact that a lot of his emotions are kind of filtered through a lens of sexuality, so combine that with just the fact that he doesn't comprehend like healthy sexuality yet. He doesn't understand really boundaries, consent to any significant degree. The most he really has learned so far is that a hard no means no. But aside from that, this stuff just isn't intuitive to him. So it allows him, who is generally not a malicious person, but it lets him do these same kind of things that a malicious person would do. And I think it's a complex topic to understand, and I think it is difficult for some people to really comprehend it, especially when reading it for the first time, because, like, you know, how do you explain that really to someone who doesn't quite get it? And a lot of times you gotta have to just say, look, he is kind of a little shit early on, and he grows up as time goes on. He becomes a better person. It is more nuanced than that, but again, I think that's a very complicated discussion to be had, and I've already in the past in videos and streams, I've talked at length about it. After I had my fill, I called out to her in a quiet voice. Young miss, wake up please. Miss Eris, it's arithmetic fun time. She wasn't waking up. I had no other choice. Don't blame me if your panties get taken. It's your fault for being a bad girl, I thought. But just as I tried to quietly slip my hand inside her long, loose skirt, Eris's eyes snapped open. Her gaze moved from her legs, where my hands were gradually up to my face. Grrr. She no longer looked half asleep. Instead, her teeth were grinding together and her face darkened with anger. Here it comes. I realized a moment too late. Her clenched fist came flying at me. My face! I hurriedly crossed my arms in front of me for protection. Ah! The impact hit my stomach instead. Her fist struck deep. I swooned in agony, my knees buckling beneath me. Well, I didn't vomit blood, but I did get punched. She sniffed once at me, then kicked me. Once she was done, she stepped over my collapsed form and walked right out of the stable. I also do think it's very significant that the worst of Rudy's creepiness tends to happen with Eris. I mean, part of it is because just chronologically, he does a lot of his growing up when he's with Eris, so he's not full gremlin mode by the time he actually reunites with Sylphie or Roxy. But also, I do think it's actually significant because Eris is the only character of the three love interests at this point who is A, a peer, and B, can actually stand up to him in a meaningful way, where he doesn't get to just kind of, again, even though this is not where his mindset is, this is not what he's trying to do, but this is kind of what the reality of things is, that the actions that he's taking are those of trying to victimize somebody. She is the one person who does not have that kind of inherent authority over him like Roxy does as his teacher. So she's like, she's on equal footing as him, but is also able to not let him kind of get away with it. So every time he crosses a line with her, she's able to return it tenfold. And I think that is actually important to kind of soften the blow of what Rudy is doing, where, yes, he's being very creepy, he's being inappropriate, the things he's doing are unacceptable, but at the same time, it's somebody who can and does kick his ass on the regular. So it's not that big of a stretch for me. And then, of course, that kind of leads into... welcome back, Alan. And that does kind of lead into how this story ultimately progresses to the point where, he kind of crosses... He does inappropriate things, but then he actually crosses a line, and that's when things actually get really real for him. There was nothing I could do. I finally went to Ghislaine for help. The woman who, according to Paul, had muscles for brains. If she talked about why she wanted to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, surely it would resonate with Eris. The girl was sure to listen to whatever Ghislaine had to say. Or so I naively thought. That's the second time that particular line shows up in this book. At first, Ghislaine told me to figure it out on my own, but when I used water magic to fake tears, she reluctantly agreed. Too easy. I don't know, that's funny. Okay, now show me what you got, I thought. Ghislaine and I didn't work on a plan, I just left it up to her. She chose to start during the break period of our magic lessons. A long time ago, I thought I was fine as long as I had a sword. Unbidden, she began telling Eris about her past, about how her... What? I hear... Sorry, I hear... something. Please, give me just 1 second. I hear noises. I can't tell if that's either my cat being... No, okay, never mind. That's the neighbor's kids. So, sorry. It sounded almost like an animal in pain, but it's actually just a kid screeching. Okay, so never mind. Where was I? Unbidden, she began telling Eris about her past. About how her master accepted her even though she was a bad kid. About her first friends when she became an adventurer. The lengthy preamble turned out to be a simple story about her and her own personal struggles. When I was an adventurer and others did everything for me. The others did everything for me. The buying and selling of arms and armors, food, supplies, and daily necessities. As well as reading contracts, maps, and signs. After we parted, I learned the importance of many things. The weight of a filled canteen, the necessity of getting coals to build a fire, and the inconvenience of being unable to use your left hand as when you're carrying a torch. Her party had disbanded 7 years ago. They were forced to do so after Paul and Zenith got married and isolated themselves by moving out to the countryside. I'd guessed as much. It seemed Paul and Ghislaine really had been in a party together. Those of us who remained talked about staying together, but Paul, our hit-and-run attacker, and Zenith, our group's only healer, had left. Even if we didn't disband then, we would have eventually. It was obvious. A 6-person party. A warrior, a swordsman, a swordswoman, a magician, a priest, and a thief. And again, it's interesting because you actually know who all of those people are later on. That was probably the makeup of their group if I broke it down by occupation. Even though Ghislaine was only a holy tier swordsman at the time, Saint's tier I think that was supposed to be, not holy tier, her attack strength would have been pretty high. I know, I've noticed once in a while there's like a weird oddity that doesn't quite line up with the with other translations, so I think the version I downloaded might have been slightly out of date when I first read it. Warrior, unknown person, tank. Pretty sure that's Tall Hand. I'm not sure. Swordsman, Paul, secondary tank, and DPS. Swordswoman, Ghislaine, DPS. Magician, unknown person, DPS. Pretty sure that's a Elise. Priest, Zenith, healer, and that, yeah. And then there's the thief, that is Geese. They sounded like a balanced group. It seemed like thief was a general term for someone who did odd jobs, from picking locks, spotting traps, and constructing a tent to making deals with merchants. It was a position reserved for someone who could read well, had a sharp mind, and was agile. Most came from merchant families, and yeah, that does sound like Geese. You could at least call them treasure hunters or something, I said without thinking. Ghislaine's nostrils flared. Thief is fitting for someone who always swiped our money and gambled it away. Didn't you guys gang up on them when you found out? Nope, they were skilled at gambling, so most of the time they came back with more than they took. They rarely came back with less than half, and they restrained themselves when they didn't have much coin. Or so she said. Still, no matter how much profit they managed to make from their gambling, why did everyone let them get away with it? I struggled to comprehend. Not to brag, but gambling was at least one thing I never touched. Although I did spend over 100,000 yen on online games, which... yeah, hot take, but gotcha addictions are no different from gambling addictions. It's just that, at least with gambling, you have a chance to make your money back. Then again, they had a womanizer like Paul in their party, so they probably weren't that concerned about the morality of their members. Everyone drew the line somewhere. There were as many rules as there were people. I mean, I will say, if I had to guess, the fact that Geese tended to come back with more than he left with, that probably softened. Okay, I hear a dog outside my door. I do apologize. It's pretty loud, so if you hear barking, I don't own a dog, so that's the neighbors they must be taking him for a walk. What exactly is the difference between a warrior and a swordsman? I asked curiously. If both professions were at the part of the vanguard, there didn't seem to be a reason to distinguish between them. If you use a sword and one of the three primary styles, then you are a swordsman. If you use a different style but still use a sword, you are a warrior. If you use one of the styles but don't use a sword, then you're also a warrior. Which, again, I know Refugene is trying to kind of add a little bit of world building, trying to make everything kind of make sense in context, but that's something that doesn't ever really actually become relevant. Oh, so that means swordsman is a special title. More accurately, it was the three primary sword styles that made their skills special. The technique Ghislaine had used when she defeated our kidnappers was quite amazing. I didn't even catch her unsheathing her sword. She barely moved and their heads just fell off. I found out afterward that the technique was called Sword of Light, a secret technique of the Sword God style, which is the technique you need to know to be a sword saint. So what about a knight? A knight is a knight. Knights are appointed by the king or liege lords. They're educated in reading and arithmetic. Some among them can even use simple magic. Since many of them are nobles, they're also full of pride. They were probably so educated because they attended school. Back then, my father wasn't a knight yet, was he? I'm not entirely sure, but he called himself a swordsman at the time. How about magic knights or magic warriors? I heard those exist too. There are some people who use offensive magic who call themselves that. You're free to call yourself what you want, no matter your profession. Aha! And, this is just a straight world-building exposition dump, not a whole lot to say here. Eris's eyes lit up as she listened to the conversation. I hope she wasn't about to decide to drag either Ghislaine or me out to the closest labyrinth. It made me anxious. That wasn't the kind of adventure I wanted. Spending each day surrounded by beautiful women? Now that was more like it. And I do find that funny because he ends up getting both. Ah, crap. I was supposed to have Ghislaine talk about the importance of learning to read and write, not this, I lamented internally. I screwed up. There was one small mercy. The following day, Eris attended all her lessons, reading, writing, and arithmetic. It was all thanks to Ghislaine. After that, anytime something happened, Ghislaine would begin recounting her struggles as an adventurer. I got a stomachache each time it happened, but thanks to that, Eris finally understood the importance of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Or maybe her main reason for attending was because she found Ghislaine's stories so interesting. Either way, it was a good result for me. And I actually do like that a lot because it's a little bit different from how the anime does it, where they had Ghislaine tell like this horrible sob story, like how she just basically got almost like comically fucked over. Whereas here it's just like, no, she's telling the stories and that's keeping Eris motivated because she gets to get Ghislaine into a setting where she is willing to tell these stories, which is not normal. And Eris is of course infatuated with adventurers, so that's exactly the type of thing she would need as motivation. Part of me wished I had thought of doing this at the beginning, but of course, we hadn't been kidnapped, she probably would have never listened to me in the first place. Back then, she looked at me like I was a worm, so my plan wasn't pointless. In any case, things had turned out well. Our first lessons involved teaching Eris the 4 basic arithmetic operations. Let's see, so much focus on Eris learning just for her to forget everything later. Yeah, I mean, that's not entirely incorrect. I mean, she does end up actually keeping a lot of the stuff she does learn, but, like, I think this is it's less about Eris learning things and more about Eris kind of, just the process she goes through in terms of how she approaches things and what motivates her, because, you know, she functions a little bit differently from everyone else. Our first lessons involved teaching Eris the 4 basic arithmetic operations. Since she had attended school and previously been instructed by tutors, she already knew how to do simple addition. Rudius, my pupil energetically thrust her hand into the air. Yes, Eris? Why is division necessary? She didn't understand the importance of multiplication and division. On top of that, she was terrible at subtraction. If anything went above single digits, she'd give up. Rather than worry about the necessity, just think of doing it as the opposite of multiplication, I explained. I'm asking, when am I ever going to use this? Okay, so for example, say you have 100 silver coins and you have to split them evenly across 5 people. My last tutor said the same thing, she slammed her fist against the table. So why do I have to split it evenly? She was quibbling like a defiant child. To be honest, there was no necessity for it. Who knows? That's something you would have to ask those 5 people. It's just that if you want to split them evenly, it's more convenient to know how to use division. More convenient? So that means I don't really need to use it, right? If you don't want to use it, then no, you don't have to. Although there's a big difference between not using something and being unable to use something. I don't know, I feel like he could frame this in an adventurer scenario, like saying, hey, you're in a party of 5 adventurers, you do a job that's worth 100 silver coins, everyone needs to be paid evenly, and they want you to do it like right now. You need to use division. Asking whether they could do something or not was a good way of shutting up someone with as much pride as Eris, though it did little to solve the root of the problem. She was trying to argue that she didn't need to learn arithmetic. In times like these, it was best to look to Ghislaine for help. Ghislaine, have you ever had problems that related to dividing things evenly? Yes, I once lost my food supplies in a labyrinth, so I tried to retrace my way back, but I messed up when I tried to ration my food to last me until I made it out. I went 3 days without eating or drinking. I thought I was gonna die. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I ate some demon feces I found on the ground, but it tore up my insides. I managed to get through the stomach pain, nausea, and diarrhea, but then I noticed a cluster of... The story went on for almost 5 minutes, making me sick to my stomach. I listened with a sickly tinge to my face. But to Eris, it was a heroic tale. Her eyes were lit up the whole time. And that's why I want to learn division. Continue the lesson. As soon as Eris said that, as Ghislaine said that, Eris ceased her quibbling. Honestly, I think also the idea is that the fact that Ghislaine wants to know these things is also, I think, enough for Eris, where, I don't know, they're probably like overthinking things a little bit. The whole Grey Rat family seemed to have an affinity for beast people, although maybe not as much as Soros. Eris was clearly attached to Ghislaine. She would always listen quietly when Ghislaine began one of her tales. It was like a little brother clinging to his older sister, eager to imitate her. Okay then, let's do some more boring practice reps today. Bring me the problems once you have them all solved. If there's anything you don't understand, ask me. With that, things gradually progressed. Ghislaine made for an excellent teacher. She pointed out each of my faults in explicit detail and gave me advice. Paul would tell you which parts you had messed up on, but he wouldn't tell you how to improve. And again, that's, I think, shows the stark difference between Ghislaine and Paul, where Paul is just kind of a natural. He just kind of feels it. He knows what he needs to do intuitively, so he can't actually explain it, whereas Ghislaine got her skills through actual study and practice, where she probably did have an aptitude for swordplay, but it was the study and discipline that actually got her to where she is now. And of course, because she understands the theory behind everything, she's able to actually instruct Rudy. Today she gave both Eris and I a sword and made us practice fighting while giving us guidance. That's a grammatical error. It should be Eris and me, because he is the object of the sentence. Let's see, I don't get why Rudy's is calling the one thing Eris is interested in trading boring in front of her. Because Rudy's stupid. Like, he's smart, but he's stupid. Like, that's kind of just... And again, let's not forget, at this point, he just still fundamentally does not understand how people work. He probably doesn't even fully comprehend that people have different thought processes than him. So when he calls it boring, that's because he finds it more boring than anything else, and he just doesn't understand how important it is to Eris, I think. Remember your attack stance and watch your opponent closely. Eris repelled my wooden sword with a dull thunk. If you can move faster than your opponent, then read their movements and aim your sword. If you're slower than they are, then shift your body to avoid the trajectory of their blade. Unable to do either, I took a hard smack from Eris's sword. The impact was strong enough that I felt it through the cotton padding of my tanned leather protector. Watch the tips of your opponent's toes and predict their movement. I took another blow. Rudius, stop using your head. Just focus on moving in before your opponent and swinging your sword. But focusing requires using my head, so which is it? And again, that's also the difference between kind of natural muscle memory and just kind of reacting, like snap reactions, and actually thinking things through, which are two very different skills. Eris, don't stop your attacks. Your opponent hasn't surrendered yet. Yes, the difference between us was obvious. Eris had the freedom to respond to Ghislaine where I didn't. That freedom also allowed her to keep smacking me until Ghislaine finally told her to stop. She held nothing back, as though she was releasing all the pent-up anger she felt during our arithmetic lessons. Damn. Damn it. Within a month, however, I saw a dramatic improvement. I was glad to have a partner like Eris who had similar abilities as me. Just like in any other field, being around someone of equal skill spurred your own growth. Actually, having somebody who's slightly better than you is actually the ideal, because then you have something that you have to really push to actually get on their level. Though Eris was really a little better than me, but it was nothing like the gap between me and Paul or Ghislaine. At least she was still at a level where I knew what she was doing. If I could understand it, I could learn from it. Like if she beat me using a certain technique, I would become more cautious so it wouldn't happen again. That sort of thinking was possible when you were on even footing with your opponent. I also do find that very interesting because he basically uses that exact mindset with Orsted, where even though he's never on Orsted's level, Orsted uses his disturb magic to stop Rudy's spells, and then Rudy realizes that and learns from it and figures out how to do it himself, which is like also just like fucking crazy ass bullshit that nobody else can ever really do, and it's funny. Paul, on the other hand, was so skilled that it was impossible to counter him. If you couldn't understand what your opponent was doing, then they would beat you before you had a clue what was happening. And that's also true. That's one of the things, slight tangent, this is one of the reasons I struggle to play things like real-time strategy games. Because the big hurdle for me is not necessarily knowing what I did wrong in the game, because a lot of times mistakes you make early on only ever really show themselves like 10, 15, 20 minutes later, because it's like poor resource allocation leads to you just not having what you need to build up a big enough army to actually attack your opponent. That's when you don't have that immediate feedback of, hey, this is what you did wrong, this is where you're gonna have to focus. Without that, it becomes really hard to learn, and that's kind of what Rudy's talking about. And again, that delayed feedback loop is what really fucks me over with real-time strategy games. Even receiving guidance from someone more skilled could be difficult because of the fundamental difference in their abilities versus yours. It would just make you doubt what you were doing. Ghislaine was good at teaching, so she was a different story. However, she could also teach you how to respond to attacks and counter them at the same time, so when you found yourself on the receiving end of one, you would end up hesitating because you were anticipating how to counter. With Eris as an opponent, however, small tricks or the slightest change in movement brought about an entirely different result. Sometimes something that worked the day before wouldn't work the following day, or Eris would do something completely different. Sometimes things I couldn't do yesterday, I could do today, and went the same for my opponent. Because there was almost no gap in our abilities, it worked out. It was those little changes and discoveries that accumulated and fostered growth. It was good having a rival. Sometimes she got ahead of me, and sometimes I surpassed her. Even if our progress came little by little, we took turns getting ahead of one another, and by the end there were huge improvements. Before we knew it, the progress built up and we became much stronger. Still, Eris learned quicker than I did. Even if a lion and a deer trained the same way, it was obvious the lion would become stronger. That was a bitter pill to swallow since I had been training with Paul since I was little. And that's also... I like how he's more correct about that than he even thinks he is, because he doesn't realize at this point that he can't do a battle aura. So there is truth to the notion that no matter how much he does train with the sword, he'll never actually be able to advance all that much. Because you just straight up need battle aura to get to any significant amount. You might need it to get to an intermediate, although I would imagine it's possible if you really train your ass off. Probably possible to get to intermediate without a battle aura, but it's like that's like the peak of what you can do. Advanced and up, you definitely need battle aura. How OP would Rudius have been if he had battle aura? Very. Because just due to the sheer amount of mana he has, like his battle aura would have made him borderline unstoppable. I mean, hell, he's really powerful even with his armor, which is, both of them are essentially like a weaker, like his smaller armor that basically brings him up to Saint tier reaction time and strength. That still, he's still very powerful with that, and I think that if he had a battle aura, his battle aura would probably be on par with a king or emperor swordsman. Maybe even like upper end of that. Like, I think actually, if Rudy had a battle aura, he would have pretty solidly like been able to establish himself as part of the 7 great powers just in 1-to-1 combats. Like, I think genuinely that's where he could have landed if he had a battle aura. Rudius has a long way to go, huh? Eris crossed her arms and looked down at me, collapsed on the ground. Ghislaine scolded her. Don't get ahead of yourself, Eris. You've been holding the sword for longer than he has, and you're older. Ghislaine only dropped the miss when we were practicing the sword. She said it was necessary, and that's also actually a good point, because when you're instructing somebody, there's no subservience you can show. You have to, you are their boss at that moment. I know that. Besides, he has magic. That's right. My magic abilities were the only thing she gave me credit for, and again, that just shows that she really respects his magical abilities. Though it is strange that he only slows down when he's being attacked, Ghislaine noted. That's because it's scary facing an opponent who's attacking you for real. As soon as I said that, Eris bonked me on the head. What the heck was that? How pathetic. That's why people look down on you. No, he's simply a magician, and that's fine. As soon as Ghislaine said that, Eris nodded arrogantly. Oh, really? Then I guess I can't blame him. So why did I get punched again? Sorry, but I don't know how to fix your cowering. You'll have to do it yourself, Ghislaine said. Which, yeah, that does also seem like the kind of thing that, yeah, you know, you just have to look inward and, you know, figure out what's going wrong and fix it. Because you can't stop yourself from hesitating, basically. Well, you can stop yourself from hesitating, but a teacher can't make you stop hesitating. You gotta find it within yourself to actually go do that. Okay. Right now, it doesn't matter who my opponent was, I just froze up. I had a long road ahead still. But I do at least feel like I've gotten a lot stronger since you started teaching me. That's because Paul is the instinctive type. Doesn't make for a good teacher. The instinctive type. Ah, I guess there were those types in this world too. What's that, instinctive type? Eris asked. The type of person who can just do things without being able to explain how they learned to do it. She pouted when I explained. Probably because she was the same type of person. Is there something wrong with that? Eris asked. I wasn't sure how to answer. Since we were in the middle of a lesson, I decided to let Ghislaine pick up the slack. I directed my gaze at her. There isn't, but it doesn't matter how much talent you have, you won't get stronger if you don't use your head, and you won't be able to teach people well either. Why won't you be able to teach people well? Because you don't even understand what you're doing. Besides, if you can't understand the entirety of it, then you won't be able to improve. It seemed to a Sword King like Ghislaine that the key to reaching an advanced skill level is to be able to apply the basics in practice. If you mastered the essentials, you would be able to use them in any given situation. Only then would you be considered a Saint tier swordsman. Again, holy tier, it's Saint tier. But more important were diligent work and talent. Of course, in the end, it all comes down to talent, I thought. I used to be the instinctive type as well, but once I started using my head and thinking logically, I became king tier, Ghislaine said. That's amazing. I was honestly impressed. She changed her ways so she could succeed. That was incredible. You're a Saint tier magician yourself, Rudius. Water magician yourself, Rudius. I'm the instinctive type as well, but magic is different from swordplay. You can do anything as long as you have enough magical power, I said. If you say so, but either way, the basics are important, you understand? Ghislaine pressed on. Honestly, I don't think that Rudy is as much of an instinctive type as he thinks he is. He does kind of feel it, but he also does make a very good teacher. He's able to teach multiple people how to do magic and how to do silent casting. And he's able to explain some pretty eclectic and not super solid concepts pretty succinctly, which shows that he has a pretty solid understanding of what he's doing. I understand. In this case, however, it was because my teacher was so good at what she did that I achieved Saint tier. But now we were talking about the importance of the basics, I had focused purely on performing magic without chanting spells. What did it mean to lack the basics of magic? Roxy's lessons had focused less on mastering the basics than on progression. Maybe she, being a prodigy herself, didn't worry as much about the foundations. Let's see, by the end of Mushoku Tensei, Rudy has the most understanding of mana and magic out of anyone ever. Does not surprise me. I still think someone like some of the ancients, like Orsted or Perugius, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a comparable understanding, because, again, even just throughout the main course of the story, stuff that Rudy figures out is stuff that is confirmed by these ancient beings. But, yeah, it doesn't surprise me because Rudy essentially has the mind and the aptitude to really study the shit out of magic. And, of course, he has the mana capacity to actually test shit out. Well, I'm not worried about becoming that strong, so it has nothing to do with me, Eris proudly declared as I was lost in thought. Well, that's also funny because she eventually does end up becoming a Sword King. I smiled wryly at her words. As a junior high student in my previous life, I'd said something similar. It's not like I'm trying to be number one, I would say, excusing my lack of effort. I was about to reprimand her for her attitude, but she continued, but I will do my best to be as good as the two of you. So much for that. She had a goal. She was different from my past self. Whew, I'm starting to get a little tired. I might actually call it by the end of the chapter. I think it's the interlude kind of acted as a fourth chapter, and it kind of threw me off. So I might end at the end of this chapter, because I'm starting to get just... Not even my voice this time, it's just general fatigue. Okay. We had free time after our morning lessons and afternoon sword practice. Today I was headed towards the library. Ghislaine and Eris had both possessed magical textbooks, so I thought there might be a grimoire there. I had a maid with dog ears guide me since I didn't know the way. Ah, we passed by Hilda, Philip's wife. She had the same deep crimson hair as Eris, with an ample bosom. I expected Eris would take after her as she grew older. I'd been introduced to her, but the two of us had little contact. Let's see, I think I'm supposed to put one hand on my chest? My lady, it seems today that is my lucky... She clicked her tongue at me and ignored my greeting. I stood there frozen, my hand still pressed to my chest. Lord Rudius? No, it's fine, I said, raising a hand to cut off the maid's attempt to soothe me. It was a bit of a shock, though. Did she hate me? I didn't think I had done anything wrong. And I will say, I do think this whole thing with Hilda was done very, very well in the anime. Come to think of it, she didn't have any other children besides Eris, did she? Yes, she does. No, let's not ask that question. If I did, I felt like someone even worse than Eris would appear and increase my workload 3 or 4-fold. That was a possibility best left unconsidered. When I arrived at the library, Philip was there. Oh, so you're interested in the library, are you? Philip had an excited twinkle in his eye. Excited about what? I wondered. Yes, a bit. Then you should take your time looking around. I took him up on that and perused the library. Unfortunately, I didn't find what I was looking for. I was hoping to get a grimoire like Roxy had, but all I found were expensive volumes that couldn't be taken out of the library. It seemed like there were only a limited amount of grimoires in the world, and people didn't leave them lying around. Guess I couldn't be so lucky. In the end, I got some books about the history of this world. I could at least study those when I was free. At the end of each day, I spent time in my room preparing for the next day's lessons. Most of that entailed creating practice sheets for reading, writing, and arithmetic. Finally, I would review my magical textbook. There was no class curriculum. I kept the pace easy so I wouldn't run out of things to teach over 5 years. My main principle was repetitive practice to make sure Eris and Ghislaine fully understood the material. I did the same thing when I taught Sylphie. Which, I know, that is interesting, because again, I do think one of the things about Rudy is that I think he's a natural teacher. I think that's kind of something that he's good at. And, you know, he kind of instinctively knew how to teach Sylphie, because she kind of had the same kind of mindset as him. I feel like Ghislaine and Eris both learned differently from Sylphie, but he still is able to kind of figure things out in a way that actually works for them, because He does successfully teach Ghislaine to read, write, and do basic math, and also some magic. And he does basically the same for Eris, so, it's interesting. Reviewing magic was important too. I didn't normally chant spells to perform magic, so I would just often forget the words. The only spells I had truly memorized were those for healing and basic poison magic. I never thought to bother memorizing offensive spells. The magic textbook was the same one I had back home. Eris and Ghislaine also had their own copies. It was first published almost 1,000 years ago and was a bestseller with numerous reprints, and that actually also explains a lot why some of the information is so outdated or so incorrect, is because it's a 1,000-year-old textbook. Like, imagine learning stuff from somebody who wrote a book 1,000 years ago. Actually, we have stuff like that, where if you ever are really like, there's videos about it on YouTube, but I think it's called the Historia Naturalis. It was basically the world's first encyclopedia. It was written by a Roman guy, where he basically tried to catalog all the information that humanity knew at that point. And, some of it was very right, but some of it was very, very wrong. Like things like earthquakes were caused by wind getting trapped underground and having nowhere to go. Or that the craters on the moon are actually puddles because that's how the moon affects the tides. It sucks up the water, which it's not true. But it's that same kind of thing that they're doing here, is they're learning from a 1,000-year-old textbook. Let's see. Yeah, before it existed, you had to find a master to teach you magic. Most of them only knew the basics of each school, so many people became students only to learn next to nothing. Though the book was now considered a bestseller, there weren't very many copies made at the time it was written. Even with enough copies for it to circulate well, those without an interest in magic would have simply ignored it. It wasn't until 500 years later that it finally started being distributed en masse. Suddenly, anyone could get their hands on a magical textbook cheaply, so the number of magicians increased greatly. It wasn't as though the world suddenly boomed with magicians, but in the kingdom of Asura at least, magic became a part of the curriculum for many noble families. Still, why did the number of magical textbooks suddenly increase? As I wondered, I looked at the back of the book. Printed there was the line, published by Renoa University of Magic. Aha, what a clever marketing scheme. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way of reinforcing Rudy's motivations for being here, but also it's pretty good world building, and it does make sense that a magic university would be one of the ones who publishes a big textbook like that, especially in an age without any kind of printing press, which in the real world, that is why the printing press was kind of the thing that made people start to suddenly get more literacy. Was like genuinely a big reason that so few people were literate back in the day was because there was just so much that just nobody ever really had anything to read. Like, there was no reason to read, and you could get by without it very easily. Once the printing press was invented and they could actually start mass producing books and newspapers and stuff like that, the written word was actually part of your daily life and actually became much more important and much more prevalent to start learning to read. So it's an interesting thing, and so it makes sense that they mass production would happen from a university who they would want people with a basic understanding of stuff so that they could get their tuition. In this way, my days as a tutor passed in the blink of an eye, and also that shows that he's enjoying himself. Name: Eris B. Greyrat. Occupation: granddaughter of the Fitoa's liege lord. Personality: fierce. Doesn't mind listening what people have to say. Again, slight little bit of growth there. Reading and writing. Can write the names of her family members. Arithmetic. Subtraction skills are unreliable. Magic. Figures she'll try her best at it. Fencing. Sword god style, beginner tier. Etiquette. Can do a normal greeting. I fucking love that. That's the after the Boreas style greeting changes to a normal greeting. That's really fucking funny. People she likes. Grandfather Ghislaine. Okay, so I am actually gonna call it for today. I know I wanted to go to chapter 4, but that I don't know that my voice is gonna make it through another chapter, so is where I'm gonna call it now. I do actually have plans to increase the amount I stream on like a consistent level, not like what I was doing with the tier list, which, by the way, I'm almost done with the viewing for that. So hopefully I'll be able to, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it done today, but over the week, certainly. And then also I don't work this Thursday or Friday because Thanksgiving. I have off of work those 2 days, so I'll have plenty of time to, even though, I mean, I won't be doing much on Thursday because I've, Thanksgiving with my family, but Friday I'll have plenty of time to work on that. I should be done with the viewing by then, so hopefully I'll get a good chunk of the script for that done over the course of this week. But once all that's done with, once the video's out and everything, I do want to kind of adjust streaming, because I want to have like a solid content strategy going forward that's going to be a mix of actual videos and streams. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it with the timing and everything, but one thing I do kind of want to do is, I know I mentioned in past streams that I kind of might want to create another channel just for like stream clips and VODs and stuff like that, where like if I start doing more reaction stuff, then I can actually put that on that channel as its own edited video so it doesn't clog my main channel. That is something I want to do. That's probably going to happen sometime in the beginning of next year. I just got to figure out the timing and how it works, how much I want to do on a weekly basis, and how to incorporate it in such a way that it doesn't actually take away from my edited content, because that's something I also do not want to neglect. Because that's also, it's how I made my name, and it's also something I am passionate about. So, of course, that means that when I finally start a plan to add more content, it's it's probably going to happen in January, which is the worst month for part of the year for ad revenue, but, it is what it is. And I'll be honest, that's actually part of the reason I want to get the tier list out in early December, and that's why I'm kind of pushing myself to that soft deadline, because December is actually the best month for ad revenue. So I think it would be cool if a big video that I think is going to do well releases in December. So, but yeah, I will have more information on what all is happening with all of that when I actually have more stuff settled. Next week, hopefully, if I can get it to work, I should be able to have live captions on screen, in which, not that useful for these reading streams, but if I ever start doing more anime stuff, then when I have to mute stuff for copyright reasons, I can at least have the words that I'm saying on the screen so that it won't be a complete wash. And because, I mean, at the moment, some of the tier list viewing VODs are basically unwatchable because of how much I had to cut out. So I hopefully will get that working next week. I don't know for sure. Okay, because again, I just found out about a plugin that I'm going to use for that last night. I haven't had a chance to mess around with it yet, but it's on my to-do list. Hopefully next week we'll see that. But yeah, regardless, all of that's going to be it for today. I hope to see you guys soon. Remember, next week is 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll be continuing on with Mushoku Tensei Volume 2. Hopefully we'll be able to get through a full stream then with no power outages, but if we don't, no, continue it. And I will say, hopefully I'll have some more news about the tier list video by then, because I am so ready for this thing to be done. Yep, thanks for everybody for showing up. Thanks whether you chatted or didn't chat or just lurked. All of you are valued regardless, and I appreciate it. We're watching tomorrow. I'm not doing the daily streams anymore. I'm getting through it a lot faster with just doing it on my own, and I'm almost done regardless. Let me see. I don't have it open because, of course, it got closed because the power went out. So, but I think I have like 6 more series to watch. I'll be able to get a good chunk of that done tonight. And tomorrow or Tuesday is probably when I'll actually finish up with the watching on my own. So, yeah, unfortunately, there's going to be no stream tomorrow, but I'm so close. I'm like right at the end. But yeah. Okay, once again, thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks for lurking. Thanks for chatting. Whatever you guys did, always appreciated. I will see you next week.